Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Fought for the Unseen. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The day started off quite normally, as it often did for someone quirkless in a world where everyone else possessed some sort of power. Izuku headed to school, fully aware of what awaited him, the stares, the name-calling. Kaken had taken to creatively suggesting he should jump off the roof, which was a new addition to the usual torment. Finding himself in the schoolyard with his notebook by his side was not ideal, but he simply stood his ground and continued with his day. What else could he do? So, Izuku took the long way home, ensuring he avoided any encounters with the bullies. Occasionally, they would seek him out to vent their frustrations, but what could he do? When faced with them alone, he lacked the strength to stand up for himself. However, standing up for others felt different. When he positioned himself as a barrier between Kaken and his latest target, a sense of pride surged within him, warming him in a way that was different from the warmth of the hands of the boy he had called a friend for so long. Izuku cherished the opportunity to help others. It was his true aspiration. Every time he gazed at his computer and saw All Might's radiant smile on the screen, he felt a pang of envy. He too wanted to bring happiness, safety, and hope to others. Even if it meant facing Kaken's wrath, enduring punches, burns, and kicks, he would do it. Because it was better for him to take the blows than for someone else. Perhaps one day, someone would see him as he saw All Might. Okay, that might be a stretch. He was nothing like All Might. But maybe, just maybe, someone would find reassurance in his willingness to protect them from harm, a flicker of hope ignited by his actions. That was the thought swirling in his mind as he walked through an alley, alone and fidgeting with his notebook. He reviewed his notes from the morning about the latest heroes. Empty Lady and her evolving quirk, Kamui Wood and his unique abilities. He scribbled down observations in the margins, noting how the new heroes seemed overly focused on their public image. He wondered about the extent of Kamui Wood's powers. Could he create any type of wood? Any density? Could he produce something as dense as ebony? That would be more durable and potentially more effective against villains. Or perhaps not. If he couldn't, Izuku mused about what kind of wood he could create. Was it a special kind, unique to his quirk? Maybe a peculiar blend of human and wood, given that he appeared to be made of it. How flammable was it? How would the hero respond if he encountered? Suddenly, Izuku was knocked over by someone. He scrambled to his feet, trying to retrieve his notebook and pencil while apologizing profusely. Instead, he found himself face to face with a creature, likely a mutant. Before he could react, his mouth was filled. Panic surged as he tasted something foul, and he felt himself choking as the creature obstructed his airway. Amid the chaos, he barely registered a voice saying, "Thank you, you're my hero." I didn't know he was in town. His mind clouded with panic. After enduring so much pain, loneliness, and ridicule, was this how it would end? He couldn't breathe. His head throbbed, and darkness crept into his vision. Then, he felt himself knocked over again. He gasped for air, desperately wanting to cough and reclaim his breath. Was he still able to breathe? A voice cut through the haze, growing clearer as the black spots faded from his sight. He found himself lying on the ground, in a street he couldn't quite place. His bag was to his left, his notebook nearby, and his throat ached as he struggled to catch his breath. And then he saw him, All Might, towering above him in his iconic costume. All Might, staring at him. Izuku sprang to his feet, nearly losing his balance again but somehow managing to stay upright. "Oh my God, All Might, I'm so pious. Glad to see you're all right. I thought I lost you there for a moment. I must be going." Wait, no. Izuku had to ask him. He needed answers. This was All Might, the #1 hero, the symbol of peace. If anyone understood the trials of being a hero and what it truly meant to be one, it was him. "Wait please, All Might, sir." He picked up his notebook from the ground, not caring that the pages were still damp from earlier, and held it up to the hero. "I need to know, sir." "Ah yes," All Might replied, taking the notebook and pencil. With practiced motions, he signed it before closing it and handing it back to Izuku. Now I must leave, young boy. Stay careful and fear not, for I am here. The hero turned to leave. Izuku's eyes darted between his idol and his bag. A plastic bottle dangled from the hero's pocket, something unsettling moving inside it. But Izuku didn't pay it any attention and quickly grabbed his bag. He then leaped onto his idol, clinging to his leg as the ground disappeared beneath him, leaving him hundreds of meters above the city. The wind whipped against his face, making his eyes sting. He heard All Might complain, asking him to let go. Izuku vaguely responded that it wouldn't be a good idea while his mind raced with one thought. Or perhaps two. The ground felt far too distant, and he longed to feel its safety again. He needed to know, could he be a hero? His one and only dream filled his mind, a desire to prove himself, to help others, to see hope reflected in their eyes instead of fear and pain. Sure, Kakin and the rest of the world told him he couldn't do it. They said it was a foolish dream, that a useless person like him could never achieve anything, making the idea of being a hero seem laughable or pitiful. He could still see the doubt in his mother's eyes whenever he spoke of it. But if anyone would know, it would be All Might. Because he was a hero. The hero. He should know better than Kakin, than his mom, than Ito, or his teachers, or the other students. If Izuku had even the slightest chance of becoming a hero, All Might would know. They landed on a rooftop. Izuku felt so weak he almost collapsed to his knees. He still felt queasy from the slime villain's attack, and this sudden flight certainly didn't help. Instead of that, he bowed. He stammered an apology, realizing how foolish his decision had been. But he had to know. I don't have a quirk, but I always wanted to help. People keep telling me to give up, and... Do you think I can be a hero? He finally shouted, eyes squeezed shut and heart racing in his chest. He stood up straight again, his question on his lips. Instead, he gasped. Before him stood a man, looking frail, with hollowed eyes and an oversized shirt hanging from bony shoulders. A concerning sight, as something dark dripped from the corner of his mouth. Where is All Might? And who are you? Izuku asked, a chill washing over him. His idol didn't seem to be listening. And who was this man? Was it his quirk that made him look so unwell? Was he okay? Maybe Izuku should call for help. Perhaps it was some sort of illness or the effect of a quirk. That would be me. Izuku's thoughts froze. I know this is quite confusing. I'm All Might, symbol of peace and justice, #1 hero, and well this. What happened to you? This was not the All Might he saw every day. Maybe this was just some cruel joke. Kakin really outdid himself if that was the case. What a harsh trick to meet your idol only to find this. 5 years ago, I fought a villain. The man lifted his shirt, revealing a painful-looking scar across his chest. Was it venomous chainsaw? Izuku wondered aloud, dread filling his entire being. What could be strong enough to do that to All Might? No, I managed to keep the media out of it and the injury until now. But it became more serious, and I slowly turned into this. He gestured vaguely to himself. I can only stay in my muscle form and do my hero work for about 3 hours a day anymore. The silence was heavy as All Might gently touched his wound while Izuku panicked in his mind. Why would the hero even say that to him? Did he put him in danger? Without a quirk, being a hero is hard. You put the lives of others on your shoulders. You have to fight off evils of all kinds, placing yourself between others and danger. Without a quirk. No, I cannot tell you that you have a chance of being a hero, his voice echoed in Izuku's ears. He vaguely saw the hero stand up, listing a few other possibilities for someone like him. But all he could hear were the words, "No, you can't be a hero." All Might didn't believe he could be a hero. Even with the best intentions, Izuku's lack of a quirk was too great a hurdle. He felt weak and incapable of helping anyone. It was just like Kakin said, like everyone else said. He couldn't do anything. There was no way civilians could rely on him. He couldn't help them. At some point All Might left. Why would he stay? He had already done more than enough. He saved Izuku, the poor boy who couldn't even save himself. He brought him here and answered his questions. He might have shattered Izuku's dreams, But that was just life, wasn't it? It had never been on his side. Being born quirkless was not easy. Being born quirkless in a world where everyone had powers was even harder. If All Might, the hero, thought he couldn't be a hero, then it must mean he couldn't. Tears streamed down his face. He felt hollow. His entire life had been filled with this dream. What was he without it? He wasn't strong. He didn't have a power to balance his weakness. People didn't like him. Not even his mother believed in his dream. What could he possibly do now? Sitting on the roof, his backpack abandoned by his side, Izuku let his tears flow, releasing all the sorrow he felt. When he felt like he had no tears left, he decided to stand up. Going home. What else could he do? As he walked to the door, his vision darkened, and he felt himself fall. The first thing Izuku noticed was the darkness of the room. It felt cold, and the chair he had fallen asleep in was anything but comfortable. He probably had ink smudged on his face, and his mom would fuss about it before letting him leave for school. As he opened his eyes, intending to stand up and head to the bathroom to wash away the terrible taste in his mouth, he quickly realized that this was not his room. He couldn't stand up. His feet were bound, and his hands were tied to the plain wooden chair. This wasn't funny. What kind of new prank had his classmates come up with? Telling him he should give up was not enough. They had to tie him to a chair and leave him in some unknown room. How amusing. But as memories began to resurface, he recalled the fish pond, the villain attack, and All Might. Izuku felt a pang in his heart, and tears threatened to spill from his eyes. He was so tired of this emptiness. He wanted to scream, to release all the pain he felt. He thought of every insult, every kick and punch, the constant reminder that he was less than them, that he didn't have a quirk like they did, that he was weak. And deep down, he feared that All Might thought the same. Izuku wasn't foolish. He understood the lessons in class easily and knew he could achieve good grades. But the truth was that being quirkless made him feel inferior to his peers. He felt a sense of pride when he completed an entry in his notebook, when he dissected a new quirk to understand its strengths and weaknesses. He could see the impressed looks from those who didn't know he was quirkless. Izuku wasn't foolish. And yet, he wanted to be a hero. He longed to prove everyone wrong, to bring hope to those who needed it, to change the society that had pushed him down. Wasn't that a foolish dream? A quirkless hero. It was both revolting and awe-inspiring. In his dreams, he sometimes imagined the public's reaction. He didn't care much for fame or fortune, but he liked to envision it during sleepless nights when his burns and bruises ached. He pictured himself finishing a battle against a villain, helping a child stand up, bringing a smile to their face. He would turn to the crowd, a sea of eyes filled with fear, judgment, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. But that was just a dream, because here he was, tied to a chair in a dim room, lost in his thoughts. He knew the statistics. He had read the articles. The 20% of quirkless individuals were fading away, not due to old age, but because society was turning against them. The youth were the ones suffering, the ones who couldn't keep up. It wasn't overt, but it was evident in the tragic stories of young lives lost, leaving behind grieving families. If all the quirkless perished, there would be no future for them. It was a quiet extermination of a time when being human was enough, before quirks defined worth. On other days, Izuku would imagine life before quirks. He had read about societies filled with war and envy, but he also knew of a time when hard work defined success. He envisioned a classroom where quirks didn't exist, where he could pursue his dreams without the weight of expectations. He imagined sitting with friends, discussing lunch plans, and enjoying the simplicity of life. But that was no longer possible. Yet he still held on to hope. Foolish hope. Dreaming had only set him up for disappointment. A sound broke through his thoughts. A door creaked open. For a moment, Izuku forgot his surroundings, lost in the sorrow of his dreams. The door closed, and footsteps approached. His breathing quickened and his heart raced. Could he endure any kind of pain, whether verbal or physical, after everything? He could usually withstand Kaken's relentless teasing, but today felt different. He didn't want to be mocked, reminded of his dreams and All Might's words. A cloud of purple mist swirled around his chair and settled in front of him. It wore a suit with metal armor where a neck would be, and two bright yellow spots shone where its eyes should be. The mist danced around it, moving rhythmically, almost soothingly. In the back of his mind, a flurry of questions emerged. What was this? A mutant type? A simple disguise? Was it a quirk-specific trait or merely a hereditary feature from his parents that served little purpose? Who were they? But what captured his attention was the screen held firmly in gloved hands. A steady breathing sound emanated from it, louder than anything else in the room. The words, "No image," stood out against the dark background. A voice rose steadily. "Hello. We have a few questions, and it would be best for everyone if you answered them quickly." It was deep and hoarse, slightly muffled by something else, with the sounds of machines humming in the background. The person holding the tablet remained motionless, like a statue, staring at the wall behind Izuku. "We know about your little meeting with All Might. One could wonder what such a hero would want with a young civilian like you. We'd like to know the details of your conversation with the famously known symbol of peace." Izuku stammered some incoherent sounds, his mind racing. This felt far more serious than anything Kaken could ever come up with. If his childhood friend learned he met All Might, he wouldn't hesitate to destroy anything good that could have come from the encounter. Sadly, the hero had already taken care of that part. But this was not Kaken trying to bury Izuku's dream in a well of misery. How did these people even know he met All Might? Izuku heard himself say something foolish like, "All Might? What's an All Might?" before the voice rang out again. Okay, maybe faceless was a bit too much, surely not very nice, but some features were definitely missing. Even sitting, the man in front of him was tall and imposing. His aura felt strong and dark. Izuku felt uncomfortable immediately, and his nausea increased. A large scar marred his face, stretching from his nose to the back of his head as far as Izuku could see. It was jagged and honestly unsettling. The man had no eyes, no hair, and almost no nose. He lacked ears. All that remained of his previous human form were the shadows of eye sockets and a crooked, cruel grin. He was connected to various devices and monitors by wires that seemed to weave in and out of his skin. Izuku couldn't even begin to imagine what could have caused this. But he did wonder how the man could hear or see what had caused all of this, and whether the machines were keeping him alive. If so, how? He didn't even ask about the Mistman quirk, even if it seemed fascinating, or how the man knew those things about All Might. How could Izuku know it was true? All he managed to say was, "Did All Might do this to you?" Because it all linked together. The terrible fight All Might must have gone through to end up with such an injury mirrored the struggle this man must have endured as well. Izuku knew that fighting, sometimes to the death, was part of a hero's work, but he couldn't imagine leaving a man in this state. What could he even do? With all this equipment around him, keeping him alive, sitting in a chair all day, probably blind and deaf. That would be him, yes. 5 years ago we battled. Each of us ended up with quite the injury. He left me for dead, and I believe he still thinks of me as such. The man's fingers tapped a steady rhythm on his armrest. I would like to know what kind of impact our fight had on him. As you can see, I didn't heal very well. I'm still dealing with the effects of that battle. I would be very grateful if you could share what All Might told you. Why are you telling me all of this? But it wouldn't be fair now, would it? Me asking a bunch of questions but never giving anything back. That doesn't seem like a nice deal. But you don't have to answer my question about All Might if you're strongly against it. I can find another question to ask if you'd prefer. This seemed like a trap. But it strangely made sense, this exchange of information. It was not what one would expect from a villain who decided to kidnap them, but the idea was there. That someone, a villain nonetheless, would be willing to exchange information was foreign to Izuku. Because no one ever wanted to exchange with him, he would consider himself lucky if people would simply talk to him. He could nerd out on the internet with people who shared his interests, and thankfully who didn't know about his quirk situation or lack thereof. But all he had were bullies if he was honest with himself. And now this terrifying man wanted to be nice to him, and even if it was solely to learn the information Izuku had, it felt oddly comforting. What kind of world did Izuku live in that he could feel some sort of happiness after what might have been the worst day of his life, just because a villain was trying to have a civilized chat with him. Tell me, Izuku Midoriya, how does it feel to live quirkless? There was the catch. Let me guess. You were born in a society where quirks define you. And you don't have one. Quirkless individuals are seen as nothing. People disregard you, pity you, ignore you. They bully you, probably. They don't listen to you, they don't like you, they avoid you at all costs because you're seen as less than them. They don't see you. At school, you're laughed at, publicly shamed for something you have no control over. Isn't it hard? To live in a world where people refuse to include you? Teachers probably don't even help because whatever happens to you is far less important than what can happen to those with powers, perhaps even students with powerful quirks. One could even be a hero, and why would they risk a kid's career for someone like you? It hurt. A lot. No one had ever said those things out loud. Izuku barely dared to think them in his mind, hidden in the darkness of the night or while nursing his wounds. He chose to believe that people didn't truly know the extent of his struggles, that they simply didn't understand. His mother sometimes glanced at him with pity while Kaken threw kicks. To each their own. But apparently, they knew. They could because this man, who knew nothing of him, had painted an exact portrait of his difficult life, all by stating the obvious. All he wanted was to help others. And he said so. It all broke down into a mess of tears and frustration. He wanted to be a hero, to help people, to bring hope and smiles if he could. It didn't matter that he was quirkless or that he didn't fit the conventional image of a hero. That couldn't stop him from wanting to help others. He wanted to give others what he lacked. Whatever pain, whatever grief, whatever challenges he had to face, he would endure them. That was what a hero was, wasn't it? To help people, to shoulder their suffering, to ensure their safety. He longed to attend UA, to learn how to fight and rescue. He wished people would stop reminding him every day of what he lacked. He wanted to be recognized as an individual with thoughts, dreams, hopes, and pains. He wished for the discrimination he faced to simply vanish. He hoped that some people understood his struggle. He hoped All Might did. He was so tired of feeling worthless, useless, and forgettable. He wanted to envision his idol as a champion for justice against discrimination, someone who wanted to bring hope to those without quirks or those with weaker abilities that could cause harm if misused. He wanted to see this more, but he never truly did. And knowing that All Might had once been quirkless hurt deeply. Maybe he wasn't born in a time when being quirkless was so rare, but he understood what it felt like to be powerless. Instead of offering him hope, All Might had simply told him no. He had cast aside all his trauma onto a 14-year-old who had just faced a terrifying attack, shattering his dreams and bringing down the seemingly unshakable symbol of peace in less than 15 minutes. Who would have thought that for 5 years he had been fighting against a ticking clock? 3 hours for a hero made patrols feel incredibly short, and perhaps his strength was diminished because of it. He should probably go back and watch some old videos to compare how long it took for heroes to take down villains now. If his strength was reduced, it might not just be due to the time limit but also because his quirk wasn't originally his. If that were true, perhaps his body wasn't suited for it, and if his body was weakened, his quirk would be too. Izuku abruptly silenced his thoughts, closing his mouth so quickly that he bit his tongue, tasting the metallic tang of blood. It was better than the taste of his own despair, but now he felt more nauseous than ever. He had just revealed everything he wanted to share, every piece of information that could put the #1 hero in jeopardy. With trembling hands, he looked up, searching for any sign of what the man was thinking. He wanted to see a telling expression, a raised eyebrow, or a satisfied smile. Instead, he was met with the same cold grin and unchanging gaze that had greeted him earlier. Meeting your idols can often lead to disappointment. Realizing that those we admire the most may not wish for our happiness and choose to ignore our struggles can be painful. I'm sorry you had to endure this. But I wouldn't say you're worthless. After all, you've provided me with quite a bit of information, and for that, I'm grateful. He swiftly retrieved something from behind his chair, a crumpled and burned notebook, still intact with a large 13 written on the front. And this, in my eyes, is far from worthless. I'd like you to reflect on a few things. You say you feel invisible and rejected, And I wouldn't doubt that society has made you feel that way. But you're not. This is a treasure, a diamond in the rough. People may not recognize your talent because of who you are or what you lack. At least, not the ones you expect to acknowledge it. I know individuals who might be interested in work like this. He shook the notebook, revealing Izuku's scrawny writing, ink smeared on the damp pages. I will let you return home, unharmed and free, just as promised. But I want you to think about what it means to help others and who truly needs help. I'll show you that you're far from useless. However, unless you actively seek me out, you'll continue to live your life as you see fit. Kurogyri. Before Izuku could respond, the world around him dissolved into a swirl of purple, and he found himself falling onto the concrete. The dark room, the faceless man, the chair, and the tape, all of it vanished. Izuku lay on the pavement, his backpack just out of reach. With no other choice, he picked himself up and headed home. The next few days were a blur. Izuku tried to forget what had happened, and he was doing a remarkable job of it. The overwhelming series of unbelievable events felt like a strange, bad dream. The only reminder of that day was the faint burn mark on his shoulder, which had been a hassle to care for due to the state of his clothes afterward. And then there was the missing notebook. After waking from a long, deep nap, Izuku reached for his backpack, hoping to check on a hero whose quirk could be enhanced by changing his approach. He nearly panicked when he realized the notebook was gone. Then he remembered that fateful day, and panic set in again. It had been morning, and his mother had already left for work. She had been worried the previous night after hearing about the attack on Kaken, which Izuku hadn't known about until then. She had reassured him that Kaken was fine and promised to bring home ingredients for Katsudon the next day so they could relax after the stressful situation. Izuku, too tired to engage, almost laughed at the thought of Kaken's troubles, but his mother's concern was genuine. The next morning, Izuku stayed in bed, claiming to be sick if anyone asked. He certainly looked the part. Dark circles under his eyes, flinching at any touch, and a sore throat made his voice barely a whisper. That day, Izuku sat on his bed, staring at the wall between two cherished All Might posters, lost in thought. He let his memories replay the events of the previous day, the reprimand from his hero, the kidnapping, and the surprisingly supportive speech from the villain. Then he buried those memories deep, hoping never to recall. He removed the posters from his walls, carefully rolling them up and hiding them under his bed. He packed away his All Might figures, thinking that perhaps he could sell them. It felt heart-wrenching, but at least he could make some money from his heartbreak. He cried for half an hour, realizing once again that his dream of becoming a hero felt impossible. Afterward, Izuku tried to push everything aside. He dried his tears and forced a bright smile onto his face, believing that fake it till you make it might help. He cleaned his room, shoving his fanboy items as far under the bed as he could. Out of sight, out of mind. He sat at his desk and began a new notebook, naming it 13 bis, deliberately omitting the usual hero analysis title. He ignored his problems and focused on recreating what he had lost. Who cared if he didn't have a dream anymore? Who cared if he didn't have a hero anymore? Who cared if he still felt like crying but wasn't sure if he could? His mother returned home, hugging him tightly and urging him to rest the next day if he was still feeling unwell. She would call the school to excuse him. It must be a terrible cold, given how his voice sounded. She held him close, tears in her eyes, expressing her relief that he was okay and that it was fortunate Kaken had faced danger instead of him. As promised, she made Katsudon, chatting lightly and repeating how glad she was that he was safe and sound. Izuku stayed home the following day, relieved that no one would worry about him, and school wasn't particularly challenging anyway. He refused to think. Instead, he filled the silence of his room with music, podcasts, movies, or radio stations, trying to drown out the thoughts swirling in his mind, ready to pounce if he ever tried to rest. He spent the weekend in his room, telling his mother he needed to rest to be ready for the start of the week. She didn't question him and kissed the top of his head before tucking him in. It was in his room that it happened. He was at his desk, finishing a new page in his notebook, when the radio shifted to a somber tone. A young journalist announced the tragic news of a hero's death. Izuku froze, his highlighter hovering over the page as he listened intently. Yesterday night, Yagihashi Yukikazu, known as the hero Kronos, died under mysterious circumstances, the reporter said. Izuku's heart raced at the name. He was found in his kitchen, and the police believe he didn't see it coming. Evidence suggests a struggle occurred, but it seems he was unable to defend himself. We still don't know if his death was caused by a quirk or a weapon. Kronos had the ability to slow time and had been a hero for 2 to 3 years, gaining popularity recently. Abandoning his highlighter, Izuku frantically flipped through his notebook, searching for any notes he might have made. Rumors had circulated about the hero, with reports of various allegations against him. His last girlfriend, Mikami Yuzari, was arrested 4 weeks ago under the name Crooked Moon, a villain inspired by the hero killer stain. After uncovering both material and numerical evidence in the home of the last hero, an investigation began. Perhaps the hero wasn't who the public believed him to be. Izuku had stopped paying attention to the ongoing discussions. Instead, he focused on the page he had dedicated to the hero known as Kronos. The hero had indeed been gaining popularity over the past few months, and Izuku was intrigued by his quirk. A rough sketch of Kronos' costume adorned his 13th notebook, alongside notes that read, Kronos. Quirk, slowing time, slows the time around him, not himself, not super speed. Can adjust the speed of his slowing. Takes at least 2 minutes to charge the quirk. Does it depend on how much he slows? Can use it for extended PRDS. Strengths. Capturing fleeing criminals. Preventing fights. Doesn't need to be on site to charge the power. Can slow time to the point where it almost seems to stop. Weaknesses. Accelerated aging. His body continues to age normally. Support items are also slowed, making it difficult to carry more than a few. Vulnerable to surprise attacks. Tires more quickly. If injured, may lose more blood. Izuku had felt proud of his analysis. He had initially viewed the quirk as dangerous for the user and admired the hero for risking himself. However, after searching online for videos of Kronos, he stumbled upon blogs and social media posts accusing the hero of various assaults. He added 3 entries to his notes about the hero's life, including the names of 3 victims, the title of a video on an obscure site showing a figure in a similar costume as Kronos attacking a motionless form on the ground, and ideas for further investigation. Then, the hero's body was discovered, aligning with his notes on the hero's weaknesses. The implications were clear, though perhaps they could have been deduced sooner. In the following hours, blogs, forums, and news stations both official and unofficial buzzed with reports of the hero's death. No known villain or vigilante had claimed responsibility, which would have led to more serious legal consequences. Izuku anxiously followed the steady stream of updates on various Twitter accounts until the next day, when the police released an official statement about the hero. It turned out he had not been a hero at all. Most of the assault accusations were substantiated and backed by evidence. The villain known as Crooked Moon had suffered abuse for months before escaping the relationship and attempting to report everything. No one had listened to her, and she had turned to villainy to seek her own form of justice. Many discussions arose about the hero system, its biases, and how unfairly non-heroes were treated regarding any issues involving heroes. Izuku could have tried to forget this situation. He could have convinced himself that he had no involvement in the matter, even with his missing stolen notebook. He could have chosen to ignore it all. With the number of memories he wished to erase, one more wouldn't have been too much of a burden. But despite his efforts, he couldn't shake off the text he received on the very day the news broke. It was a brief message from an unknown number, 2 messages, in fact, arriving one after the other. They read, "I told you weren't useless. This is what I mean by helping those who need it." Initially, he dismissed it. Unknown numbers usually meant either mistakes or harmless pranks. However, a morbid curiosity took hold of him, and he found himself unable to ignore it. He kept thinking about the faceless sender. Who else could it have been? It was a clear reference to their previous conversation, particularly his last words. What does it mean to help people? And who needs help? I'll show you that you're far from useless. The sender had shown him that there were others like him, people who were often ignored because society favored those with strong quirks and so-called heroes. These heroes seemed untouchable, distant from the public, who had no power over them unless they rallied together to fight back, and even then, the law and authority were rarely on their side. Izuku felt a wave of nausea at the thought, but he realized his analysis had contributed to something meaningful. Even with the tragic death of a man, it had brought a sense of justice and closure to those whose lives had been shattered by him, preventing further harm. The people who had no one to fight for them were just a little bit safer because of his ideas and notes. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about it. That's how he ended up contacting the number back. Izuku felt a wave of unease wash over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a monumental mistake. What was he doing, waiting to meet with a villain in a coffee shop? It felt like a reckless decision that could lead to disastrous consequences. Yet, he couldn't stop thinking about the stories he had read online, victims expressing gratitude for justice finally served, while others remained haunted by their aggressors, who roamed free, their words holding more weight than the cries for help. He imagined himself in their place, feeling abandoned when no one stepped in to help. What if something happened to one of his bullies, similar to what had befallen Kronos? How would he react? Izuku shook his head, trying to dispel those thoughts. Wanting to help was one thing, but relishing in the suffering of others was entirely different. Even if they deserved it? A voice in the back of his mind questioned, eerily reminiscent of the faceless man. The cup in his hands was warm, the coffee half-finished. As he waited, he found himself people watching, attempting to silence the voices in his head. He felt a bit mad for thinking that way, but his guilt lingered, as did his pride, which seemed to grow stronger with each mention of the murder he had been following. He struggled to reconcile his conscience with the situation. So he waited. The coffee shop was busy enough to provide some anonymity, but not so crowded that he felt overwhelmed. The coffee was good, and the barista had been friendly, not batting an eye when Izuku asked about his quirk and thanked him for the tip he left. He had no idea what to expect. Surely, the man he was meeting, disfigured and connected to monitors, couldn't move about freely. Kurogiri, the mist man, would draw too much attention, even just passing through. But Izuku didn't know anyone else who could be associated with the faceless man. He hadn't fully considered the consequences of his decision when he replied to the text, asking if he could help more people this way. He flinched when someone took the seat across from him. His mind immediately began to analyze the newcomer. The face mask added to the anonymity, and the red eyes held a tired gaze, with skin that looked chafed and irritated. The man's light blue hair was uneven but relatively long, and he held a cup that appeared to contain hot chocolate. His hands were partially covered with artist gloves, suggesting he might need direct contact for his quirk to work. The man scratched lightly at his neck and glared at Izuku. "Sensei told me not to harm you, but mumbling about my quirk isn't a great start for our first meeting." Izuku quickly focused, remembering why he was there and who he was meeting. "Sensei? Are you the person I'm supposed to meet about?" The analysis. "Apparently, you're some kind of cheat code, a situation expert to give our team an edge. Sensei wanted to give you a chance. So, are you? Some sort of secret weapon? I'm not interested in side quests." If Izuku hadn't developed a keen sense of awareness from dealing with bullies, he might have been taken aback. Was that a video game reference? Was that all this man could think about? It was an intriguing perspective, and Izuku wondered what other metaphors might emerge in their conversation. "I want to help people." The man continued to stare at him, unblinking. Izuku tightened his grip on the cup. "Heroes." The scratching at his neck paused for a moment. "Heroes don't save everyone, they often choose not to. I want to help those whom heroes overlook." Sensei? He made me realize I could make a difference. I might have some connection to the situation with Kronos. A silence fell between them. Izuku noticed the barista smiling at a customer, a woman trying to keep her child entertained, and two teenagers who seemed to be on a date. "Are you the one who gave Sensei the special item? The notebook he keeps mentioning? Is that why you'd be our secret weapon?" The man's gaze drifted around the room before settling on a screen displaying hero news. "You seem more interesting than most side characters, I'll give you that." He stared at Izuku for a moment before standing up. He slipped his hands into his sweater and pulled up his hood. "All right, If Sensei thinks you'll be an asset, I'll let you join the team. But I won't hesitate to cut you loose if you don't measure up. He walked out, turning back to give Izuku a piercing look. Without thinking, Izuku stood up and hurried after him, stepping out into the street. This was a bad idea. A really bad idea. Reckless and dangerous, and Izuku feared he might regret it by the end of the day. But he couldn't shake the memory of the look in the man's eyes when he regarded the heroes filled with resentment, betrayal, hurt, and disdain. Izuku hoped he could transform his own gaze into something cold and fierce instead of pained and weak, even if he feared what that might entail. So he followed the stranger down the street and into the nearest alley, barely hesitating as the man walked straight into a cloud of purple mist. Izuku stepped in after him. On the other side was a bar. Dimly lit, it smelled of coffee and dust, with a hint of cleaning product mixed with citrus. The bar was almost empty. The mist man, Kurogiri, stood behind the bar, dressed in the same attire Izuku had last seen him in, polishing a glass with practiced motions. Behind him, the collection of bottles adorned the wall, illuminated by soft yellow lights. The walls were painted a deep red, matching the stools, with a few booths lining the sides. The masked man settled into one of the booths, grabbing a controller without offering any information to the two newcomers. Kurogiri's yellow gaze turned to Izuku, who offered a weak wave, unsure of what to do next. "Young Tamura, I wasn't expecting a guest." The man merely grunted, vaguely gesturing toward Izuku. "This is the secret weapon Sensei told me to meet. He can join the League of Villains. Did you name your villain organization after an old video game?" Izuku suddenly interrupted. "I'll have you know that it's still playable in that. It's not what the audience is looking for anymore. Since the beginning of this era, it has lost its popularity. The gameplay is decent, but there are better options now in terms of combat and even storytelling, I'd say." "Not that I'm not glad to see you two getting along," a deep voice interrupted. It belonged to the faceless man, whom Izuku assumed was this sensei. "I'd like to make the presentation. I'm pleased you agreed on the addition of a new member, Tamura. This is Izuku Midoriya. His mind is remarkable, and I'm confident that if we nurture it, he could become a key member of your group and an asset to your plans. Izuku, this is my son, Tamura Shigaraki, and Kurogiri, who assists him. I trust that everything we discuss here will remain confidential. I don't have anyone to share this with, even if I wanted to. Well, I hope we can provide you with what you're missing, just as you can offer us what we might need. I see potential in you, and I'm going to give you the tools to reach as far as you can." Izuku finally located the source of the voice. It was a turned-off screen, or so it seemed, with a red dot flashing intermittently in the top right corner. But enough of the serious talk. You should start by relaxing and familiarizing yourself with your surroundings and the people around you. I'll leave you to it. Know that I am glad you chose to reach out to me again. You are going to be an invaluable member, Izuku. Weirdly warmed by the words of the man, this sensei, Izuku shyly made his way to the bar where he decided to sit. He chatted politely with the mist man, asking a few questions about the place and the man's quirk as he grew bolder. It was truly fascinating. Rap Gate was a teleportation quirk controlled by the fog that enveloped the man. Izuku learned that Kurogiri had a body beneath the layer of darkness but would not reveal it. He could teleport only to places with precise coordinates. Izuku found himself sketching the man as he resumed cleaning, adding notes and thoughts about his quirk. He probably started mumbling at some point, but no one called him out on it, so he didn't mind. After a while, Shigaraki sat beside him, bringing his video game and asking for food and drink. They each kept quiet, minding their own business. At some point, Izuku began glancing at the screen, first out of curiosity and then with growing interest. Shigaraki had removed his mask, revealing chapped lips and dry skin. A mole decorated his chin, and a scar traced his lips with a pale line. His eyes were focused on the screen, and his fingers moved with practiced ease. Sometimes a frown would shadow his gaze, or a smirk would briefly light up his face. After abandoning his notebook completely, Izuku didn't try to hide his interest and started questioning Shigaraki about the game. Reluctantly at first, with hesitation and quick answers, they discussed it. Izuku had heard of the game but wasn't well versed in it, and they chatted for a while about the best strategies to follow a certain enigma and the smartest ways to level up some characters. One thing led to another, and Izuku ended up talking about quirks again, sharing his thoughts on how he believed that upgrading people's quirks was not impossible if they set aside their pride. Most people tended to think they knew their powers better than anyone else simply because they were theirs and refused to listen to constructive criticism. Shigaraki seemed to be listening, or at least he wasn't telling Izuku to stop or that he was being annoying. Izuku felt a surge of happiness. He thought of all the times he tried to discuss quirks with others, like Kaken, who called it creepy until he started hitting Izuku whenever he tried, or his mother, who always seemed lost and would change the subject. Here he was in a villain hideout, talking to someone who liked video games and seemed okay with Izuku's habit of mumbling, happy because someone finally paid him attention. Shigaraki interrupted him. "Do you think you could do it?" Confused, Izuku asked what he meant. "Level us up?" Kurojirini, others. Sensei seemed right when he said you had some brains. What would it take to level up some characters and party members? I mean, it could involve trying out new things with the quirk, testing its limits. Usually, people underestimate themselves and their quirks because they don't think of all the possibilities. It can also involve support items. It's something that heroes overlook most of the time. They rely too much on their quirks, and support items are seen as weaknesses. And what resources does that take? What kind of requirements for the quest to be achievable? How do you access it? Theoretically, I just need the name of the quirk and its usual uses. Not all of my theories end up being true or feasible, but that's how figuring out the limits usually works. You know, like experiments in science. Quirks are just biology. Izuku would have continued discussing it for a while if they had let him, but Kurojiri interrupted them, announcing that it was getting late and perhaps Izuku didn't want to worry anyone. After bidding everyone goodbye, feeling somewhat giddy after the whole day, Kurojiri sent him back to the train station closest to his home, and he simply had to walk back. He felt conflicted. Anxious, guilty, and happy, guilty for feeling happy and angry for feeling guilty. On one hand, he was happy. For the first time in what felt like forever, people had listened to Izuku and included him in their discussion. They didn't make him feel like an outcast, someone unwelcome or without purpose. They didn't remind him of his quirklessness and perhaps didn't even care. They praised him for his work and ideas, offering real thoughts on the matter. Shigaraki had rambled to him in the same way Izuku tended to do, explaining in detail whatever he was doing and why. It felt so foreign to somehow belong. Yet, on the other hand, his guilt tried to overwhelm him. It was failing because Izuku had never felt so satisfied and even happy. But the idea that he was now happy with villains, with people who clearly disliked, even hated, heroes, and had killed one in the past, weighed heavily on him. Whoever Kronos was, he had still been murdered. Izuku became a bystander in his own mind, watching his happiness and guilt clash relentlessly. The part of him that still hoped to be a hero, to be on the good side of society, to be liked as he deserved by the world, was in constant conflict. But slowly, it was being overpowered by the realization that the world he lived in, the world he desperately wanted to be a part of, wasn't good. He lived in a world that didn't want him, a world where he had no hope of finding a place he deserved. It certainly wasn't somewhere anyone should want to be. It promoted selfish mindsets under the guise of bravery and generosity, while those who truly needed kindness were forgotten and swept aside. Lately, Izuku wasn't sure whether he wanted to fight for this world or against it. And then again, his guilt and hope would team up to remind him that these people were individuals who deserved kindness, that he had no right to judge them. But why shouldn't he have that right when everyone judged him? Why did everyone deserve kindness, a nice word, a bright smile, if he didn't? It was so unfair. The next day, when Izuku went to school, he stayed quiet. He didn't rise against his oppressor, didn't tell them to stop, didn't run. He listened to the mockery and took the punches, noting each one. He observed how many turned a blind eye to what was happening, how many laughed, kicked, who left and who stayed, who avoided his gaze when he stood back, and who didn't care much and tried to push him down again. And he noted who helped. No one. Day after day, the anger and resentment grew like a monster, waiting for its moment to leap out and tear everything apart, fed by the words of the faceless man and the undeserved actions he endured. Without his hopeless dream, after losing it so violently, Izuku couldn't see the world in a positive light. The smile he tried to wear constantly faded, and the quiet responses to the bully's remarks disappeared. Every day after school, Izuku returned to the League's hideout. Shigaraki insisted on calling it that to make it sound more official. Izuku would do his homework or bring his computer for research, while Shigaraki played one of his games, and Kurogiri either cleaned or did nothing. It was surprising when Kurogiri sometimes stood and stared into space, as if waiting for time to pass. Sensei, as Izuku had taken to calling him since he never introduced himself otherwise, would occasionally ask about Izuku's day or his thoughts on specific subjects. These questions were usually pointed, and Izuku loved brainstorming about them. He felt like he was genuinely contributing, whatever the purpose. Izuku found himself thinking about all of it maybe a little too much. After spending so much time avoiding the question of what he was supposed to do in the future, especially after giving up on his hero dream, he was forced to confront it. The teachers had already collected applications for high schools, and Izuku had only applied to hero schools, with UA as his first choice. They would probably allow students to change their applications if there was a real need, but certainly not for the quirkless kid who dreamed too big. If Izuku tried out only for heroes and failed, society would finally discard him. He was almost certain that his intention to apply was bad for the school's reputation unofficially, of course. He had overheard a teacher complaining about their pay decreasing due to the quality of the students. That teacher had looked at him particularly harshly that day and made a few derogatory comments during class that his classmates enjoyed repeating as an excuse for their bullying. So here was Izuku, sifting through the tabs open on his computer, trying to figure out what to do. Again, his mind felt divided. A part of him still wanted to pursue heroism, but it was such a small part that Izuku didn't even bother listening. It felt like a foolish dream, and no one would take him seriously. He had seen firsthand how people viewed quirkless individuals and what they might do to him if he ever got the chance, if it was even a chance to join the hero course. Knowing his luck, the entrance exam wouldn't be fair and would favor strong and flashy quirks instead of genuinely testing someone's will to help and whether they had what it took to be a hero. Since joining the League, Izuku had done some research and noticed that heroes emerging from the most prestigious school tended to be the most showy, more interested in social events and conventions than in fights and investigations. Some were even downright reckless in their endeavors, like Endeavor, who often caused more harm than good in battles. Another part of his mind urged him to still pursue something good. All Might had mentioned careers in law enforcement, even medicine. Izuku was intelligent and could assist in crime scenes, piecing together clues to solve cases. He could still make a difference, even if the impact would be smaller, and that wasn't so bad. But he also knew that on many application forms for schools and universities, he needed to list his quirk, which would determine his future. Having a quirk considered weak was one thing, lacking one entirely was another. A voice, so reminiscent of Sensei's, kept telling him he could do more, that he couldn't settle for not so bad, for merely surviving. He deserved better, no matter what the bullies said. He could achieve more, and who cared if most didn't believe in him? That was the third part of his mind, the one winning the internal struggle, even as Izuku's inner child felt heartbroken by the decision. But his inner child was naive and hopeful, unaware of the harsh realities of the world. He would prove them all wrong. Society wanted to keep him out? He would break through its walls and carve out a place for himself if he had to. They were all so determined not to help, so sure of his uselessness and stupidity, underestimating him. He knew there were others like him, people whose quirks didn't fit societal norms, individuals facing challenges due to their abilities or upbringing. Powerless individuals because they weren't allowed to empower themselves. Izuku was going to give them that opportunity. After spending so much time on forums that complained about society's indifference to their struggles, Izuku had seen enough to understand what was happening and what wasn't. He knew names and situations he wouldn't have encountered elsewhere. He had learned of things that repulsed him so much that he sometimes felt ashamed to be part of the human race. Izuku still wanted to help. It was his greatest strength but also his most significant flaw. He had always wanted to make a difference, and even now, he couldn't shake the feeling that he could still do something about it. Perhaps society's outcasts could join forces and support each other, disregarding the world and its rules. So Izuku thought. He thought, and a troubling part of his mind liked what he envisioned. Joining UA would be a bad idea. Kaken would be there, and he would spend his days surrounded by aspiring heroes. As someone who liked to think of himself as part of a group that called themselves the League of Villains, that would be a significant problem. But Kaken had never been able to see past his own arrogance. He wouldn't even notice Izuku until it was too late. Heroes often had a tendency to think of themselves as superior to everyone else. It all made sense. Kaken would be a perfect hero by society's standards. Izuku explored the various courses at UA school. He was aware of the hero program, the reason the school was so well known. There was also a general studies course and a business program, which intrigued him. After all, what better way to understand society's flaws than through its economy? Money was often the root of many problems. However, what truly captured his interest was the support course. He had always viewed support items as invaluable tools for heroes willing to use them. He had even designed a few concepts to assist potential heroes based on their quirks, although he struggled with the practical aspects of creating them. He planned to discuss his ideas with Sensei, who would surely have insights. He was right when he said that UA was a cornerstone of the hero world. The teachers there were pro-heroes themselves, responsible for nurturing and training the next generation. The principal, Nizu, was a lesser-known pro who was one of the rare cases of animals developing a quirk. Highly intelligent, he often assisted in solving cases worldwide. If the League ever gained notoriety for their actions, having intel from within the school would be crucial. One stone, two birds, perhaps even three if Izuku could tarnish the reputation of a certain explosive boy. True to his word, Izuku was eager to analyze the quirks of others for Sensei. He had already prepared notes for Kurogiri, adding ideas to his notebook and organizing them for Sensei's review. He had put significant effort into understanding Shigaraki's quirk, which was as fascinating as it was perilous. Named Decay, Izuku had correctly assumed that the quirk had an irreversible effect on anything touched by 5 fingers. It literally turned everything Shigaraki touched into dust. Izuku began by studying the effects of the quirk. He wanted to determine whether the effects could be controlled or if the decay spread to other components beyond dust. He wondered if the quirk merely accelerated the natural decay process or if it was one of those quirks that defied explanation. He considered whether the effects varied depending on the material, perhaps different for organic versus non-living things. He also sought ways to prevent the quirk from activating without relying on gloves, as those precious seconds could be critical in a fight. He questioned the impact of the quirk on Shigaraki's skin. Since it was his own quirk, it didn't seem to harm him, but it didn't appear harmless either. Was Shigaraki more resilient to his quirk's effects, or had his body adapted to avoid them? Izuku also pondered how Shigaraki discovered his ability to resist his own quirk and what might have happened if he hadn't had that counterpower. He added notes on potential ways to alleviate this irritation using the quirk itself. Of course, Izuku wasn't entirely sure. This wasn't something taught in school or easily found online, but the science behind quirks was relatively straightforward. Like everything else, it was rooted in DNA. If he had the materials, he would love to pinpoint the genes responsible for quirks and their effects, as well as whether mutations had occurred in the subject's DNA to enable their use. He could compare it to his own DNA, which lacked the quirk gene. In doing so, he hoped to discover ways to mitigate or eliminate the effects of quirks or create products to assist those whose quirks hindered their use of everyday items. For instance, normal lotion likely wouldn't work for Shigaraki due to his quirk, but if Izuku could identify what made Shigaraki's skin unique, he could modify the lotion to help him. That was how he found himself back at the bar, asking questions to his friend while ensuring Sensei could hear as well. They were testing the limits of Shigaraki's quirk, a pile of dust forming beneath his hands as a plate rapidly deteriorated. Izuku was trying to determine whether the quirk could be controlled without gloves. He had asked Shigaraki to try and decay only half of the plate, but he failed repeatedly. "It's not working. That's not how it works." It decayed Mon and Hana, and everyone else, and it will decay the plates. The properties of the weapon won't change just because we want them to. Izuku blinked in surprise. He didn't know who Hana or Mon were, but it sounded like his friend had unintentionally harmed people with his quirk, and he seemed to be deeply affected by it. Unsure of how to respond, he felt a wave of concern. Thankfully, Sensei intervened. Well, Tamura, if you wish to share, you could have explained more. Do you want some help? Shigaraki, who was scratching his neck anxiously beside Izuku, appeared uncomfortable. Izuku wanted to grab his hands to stop him from causing more harm, but he realized this wasn't the right moment. Until he completed his project and created his solution, he had no real answers for his friend. After a moment, Shigaraki nodded, and Sensei began to speak. Tamura discovered his quirk during a tragic event. It manifested after a confrontation with his so-called family, a group of rough individuals who failed to care for him. He lost control of his quirk, and decay consumed a significant portion of their home. Afterward, Tamura sought help. But no one came to his aid. He pleaded with strangers and heroes alike, a 4-year-old boy abandoned in a world that turned its back on him. That's when I found him and offered him a chance to prove his worth. Perhaps you should take a break from this training session and relax for a bit. The message was clear. Shigaraki stood up and retreated to his booth, clearly wishing to be left alone. Izuku was anxiously fidgeting with his notebook, still open on his friend's page. He felt a pang of guilt for stirring up such memories. Yet, a simmering anger bubbled within him. He understood why Shigaraki held such disdain for people, especially heroes. The thought of being abandoned, consumed by fear and perhaps guilt, with no direction or purpose, was unfathomable. Naturally, he had turned to heroes for guidance. It was their duty to know and to help, yet they had done nothing. It was a disheartening realization. Izuku felt a deep sense of regret. He couldn't believe he had once yearned to be part of a system like this one that seemed to care only for itself. He had cheered for heroes as they triumphed over villains, but who were the true villains? They were always depicted as the antagonists, selfish individuals who thrived on the suffering of others. He pondered how many people struggled to make ends meet, unable to find work due to their quirks. How many had faced abuse, told they were worthless or monstrous? Izuku wondered how many had truly been given a choice. Turning toward the screen, he was certain that Sensei was still listening. I've decided that I will still go to you, he said, letting the words linger as he searched for the right way to express his thoughts. They have a support course and the best resources. I believe that utilizing them could help me with my future plans. And having someone inside could aid our cause. And what would that cause be, Izuku? Our society places heroes on a pedestal, feeding their egos while they forget their humanity. They lose sight of what it means to be a hero and tarnish the very concept. They abandon so many people who don't fit into their so-called perfect society. I want to help those individuals. No one deserves to be cast aside or trampled on, and neither do they. Heroes may think they are invincible, but they have vulnerabilities just like anyone else. I don't know what your ultimate goal is, or Shigaraki's, but I know you have resources, and we share a common purpose. That's my cause. Izuku could hear the faint sounds of Shigaraki and his game, Kurogiri's coffee machine bubbling in the background, and the flickering light in the next room. His heart raced, filled with anger and a strong desire for justice that overshadowed his other thoughts. Well, that certainly is intriguing. I will support you in your endeavor, Izuku. I never lied when I said I believed your intellect could achieve great things, and I'm pleased you've chosen to join us. Tamura needed the company, we both needed your insight, and it seems you need us just as much. If you wish to attend UA High School, particularly their support course, you should start training for it now. Do you have any ideas on what might be useful for you? Izuku hadn't considered it yet. He knew he lacked knowledge about machines and technology, but support relied heavily on those skills. He expressed this to the man, realizing he needed to learn how everything functioned, how to create, connect, and make it all work. He shared his idea of using biology to enhance quirk functionality, though he was unsure how to proceed. And I'd also like to learn how to code. Hacking. The very next day, a man was waiting at the bar, holding a drink and checking his phone. Shigaraki wasn't there, but Kurogyari was at his usual spot, ready to serve. The man turned around when Izuku entered, putting down his phone to study the teen with keen eyes. Kurogyari remained motionless, and Izuku, feeling tentative, took a seat on the stool beside the man. Keeping his gaze low, he caught only a glimpse of the man's face from the corner of his eye. He didn't know who this person was or why he was there, and he was determined to avoid any potential trouble. "So you're the kid who wants to learn hacking?" the man asked suddenly, assessing Izuku's height, hair, freckles, and stance. "Why?" Izuku hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He couldn't exactly say, "To spy on you," to this stranger. Useful skills to have. "You never know," he replied simply. The man snorted, finally looking away as he picked up his glass again. "Well, I can't say that's untrue. But if you have the money, you can always ask the right people to do your dirty work. Relying on others is a liability. I'd rather pay the right people to teach me how to do it myself." "Well, if you have the money, anything is possible. Do you?" "He does," interrupted Sensei's low voice. The man looked slightly startled but quickly regained his composure. "Sure, I won't pry," he said, turning back to Izuku. "I'm Jiren." He extended a hand toward Izuku. Izuku quickly tried to gauge the man's quirk. There were no visible signs, no protective gear or items that indicated he needed to shield himself or others. Observing the man's reaction, Izuku reached out and shook his hand. He felt no particular effect or discomfort, just hoping to offer some guidance to those in need. Jiren shook his head knowingly, a smile forming on his lips. "Well, guidance then, since you wish to remain anonymous. I'll leave." He downed his drink and turned toward the screen. "I'll contact you when I find someone willing to take on an apprentice. See you." With that, the man left through the door. Kurogyari took the empty glass and returned to work as Izuku glanced at the screen. "Well, guidance. To each their own, I suppose. It's an interesting name. You'll probably have to stick with it now. You'll follow those hacking classes with whoever Jiren finds suitable. You can trust him to some extent. He works with many people in the underground, and his reputation relies on the fact that he doesn't ask questions and doesn't answer them. And before you ask, his quirk is called muddled. It causes minor amnesia. He uses it only if he's in trouble. I recommend staying cautious if you ever find yourself alone with him. You never know who might be looking for him. As for your other project, I'm currently working on it. I'll let Kurogyari know when you can visit our facility. Until then, Izuku, take care of yourself. And thank you for Kurogyari's quirk analysis. Some of your advice will be taken to heart." The next day at school was interesting, to say the least. Before class even began, the bullies had fun taking Izuku's lunch and tossing it into the fish pond, just like they had done with his notebook a few weeks ago. Izuku stood by the window, lamenting his lost food, when the bell rang and the teacher entered. He was scolded, shamed for not knowing his place and for not following the rules like his well-mannered peers. He was told he should be ashamed of himself for bringing them down with his mere presence. But Izuku wasn't even allowed to respond. The teacher sent him to stand outside the classroom. He spent the time staring at the wall, trying to ignore the chuckles and nasty remarks coming from inside. During homeroom, he heard the teachers discussing the upcoming entrance exam, insisting that the class was fit to be proper and brave heroes if they tried. After all, they all had strong quirks. Of course, that wasn't true, but since Izuku was the least powerful of them all, they could use the teacher's words against him, and none could be worse than Deku, after all. The next class was English. Since no one would ever work with him, Izuku had to do his presentation alone. He tried to summon the confidence he had gained from Shigaraki and Sensei, but he wasn't even allowed to finish. Students threw papers and pens at him, loudly whispering about how boring and useless it was to listen to him. The teacher, one of the few who didn't usually add to the chaos, simply thanked him and sent him back to his seat. For lunch, Izuku could do nothing but sit away from everyone else. He had nothing to eat, and the thought of Kurogyari's omelet felt like a distant dream. He couldn't do much. He hadn't brought his phone to school after Kaken had broken 2 of his previous ones, and he didn't dare take his notebook out of his room or the bar, where all his sensitive information was stored. He was currently working on coding them. At first, coding seemed feasible. Izuku thought he could find parallels in another subject, perhaps cooking. It would be easier if his notebooks resembled a recipe book, but it wasn't simple and had too many elements that required actual culinary knowledge, which he lacked. He knew how to make miso soup, fry eggs, and heat things in the microwave, but that was about it. Instead, Izuku decided to create a language. He filled an entire notebook with ideas and references to existing languages and found himself enjoying this challenging exercise. He couldn't simply create an alphabet and translate everything from Japanese to this new writing. That would be too easy, and the whole point was to secure his ideas. Instead, he chose a few languages: Japanese, English, Chinese, and Arabic to develop a writing system and a language with its own rules. He had hidden the notebook where he worked on this language and planned to burn it once he was finished, ensuring no trace of the translation remained except in his mind. The afternoon passed almost uneventfully. Izuku kept his head down, ignoring the few papers that flew onto his desk and the accusations that he was passing notes in class. The real trouble began when he was on his way home. He wanted to go home, drop off his things, and head to the bar. Shigaraki had mentioned teaching him a game they could play together, and Izuku was eager for the distraction. It had been a long time since he had played with anyone since the news of his quirklessness spread. Plus, he was hungry and looking forward to enjoying the Mistman's cooking. However, instead of heading home, he collided with Kaken, falling onto his back and gasping for breath for a moment. As he struggled to regain his composure, Kaken began to rant, his words dripping with disdain. "The teacher said you're still trying for UA? Huh, Deku? Do you think you're better than us? You're nothing, and you need to remember your place." As some of Kaken's friends joined in, they began to kick him lightly, just for fun. "You waste everyone's time. Why do you even bother coming to school? You're too slow to learn anything. Poor teachers, having to deal with you and your ridiculous face every day. They didn't sign up to teach someone like you." One of them kicked Izuku's leg, causing him to wince. "And poor Miss Yuji, forced to listen to your presentation. She was so uncomfortable she didn't even tell you how bad it was. You don't stand a chance at getting into the school. They have standards, you know. They'd rather accept a dog than someone like you. Just give up." Laughter erupted around him, and the kicks subsided. Izuku finally looked up to see Kaken standing over him, a cruel smirk on his face and malice in his eyes. "You should really take my advice. I wasted my breath on you, so you should be grateful. Stop being a waste of space and end it now. You'd be doing everyone a favor." Kaken's hand rested on Izuku's shoulder, and it felt like fire. Chapter end. When Izuku met Jiren for his hacking lesson, he was asked to come to a coffee shop first, similar to his previous meetings with the League. He still needed to be careful with his movements, but his ribs had healed enough for him to walk longer distances. The scar on his shoulder was a vivid reminder of his past, a flash of red against his pale skin, and he hated it. At least it didn't hurt anymore, but the scar in his mind lingered. Eating was a challenge. After his painful experience, he had become acutely aware of the similarities between human skin and cooked meat. Whenever food was placed in front of him, the smell and memory of his burn would overwhelm him, making it hard to distinguish between what was on his plate and what he recalled. He had even thrown up once when his mom forgot dinner on the stove. Sipping another coffee, he worked on his notebook, ensuring his writing was legible and practicing his calligraphy. Jiren arrived, smiling as he approached, holding a cup in one hand and a bag in the other. "Glad to see you made it. I wasn't aware you had, an incident? I wouldn't recommend fighting if you're trying to keep a low profile. Anyway, the person I found for your lessons won't meet in person until she's sure you're committed. She loves hacking more than anything else, and she's serious about it. She would love to teach, for the right price of course, but she doesn't want just anyone entering her world unless they're genuinely interested. She asked me to give you this," he said, tapping the bag and taking a sip of his coffee. "I can promise it won't explode. The rest is up to you." Carefully, Izuku opened the bag and pulled out a computer. A post-it note attached read, "An old one of mine. If you're serious, you'll figure out how to unlock it." It was signed with a little heart. Izuku searched for another note but found none. He attempted to power on the device, but the screen remained dark. He hoped it was just dead and needed a charger, but clearly, his potential teacher wanted him to prove himself. If he wanted to enter UA, he needed to do better than just some cryptic notes. He was determined to find a way to unlock the computer. If this, Jiren mentioned, truly intended to take him on as an apprentice, he needed to show he was capable. So, Izuku packed up the computer and finished his coffee, glancing at Jiren. Did she give you any more info? A deadline or something? Nope. Then I'll get going. I have some work to do. See ya. Jiren smiled and waved as Izuku left. From the window, Izuku noticed a man slip into the chair he had just vacated, leaning toward Jiren. If he had been waiting for Izuku to leave, he must have been there for a while. Maybe he needed to work on his situational awareness. At home, Izuku got to work. He had no idea how to tackle the challenge ahead, but if he had one talent, it was research. He was determined to find something online that would help him get started. 2 days later, Izuku finally cracked the device. The screen lit up, displaying a few green lines. He had been right, it hadn't been too difficult. The security was minimal. The real challenge was figuring out how to turn on a computer without the usual means. Once he grasped the logic behind it, everything fell into place. Now, as he read the lines appearing on the screen, he felt a rush of excitement. Congratulations, Guidance. As you read this message, I'm being informed of your advancement. I'll contact Jiren and organize an actual meetup. Keep this computer. I'll probably show you how, but I made it untraceable, so it should be safe to learn what you wish to learn and do so securely. You'll learn how to use a computer to its full capacity. At least, I hope so. Until we meet, perhaps try to think of your goals with these new skills. Another little heart decorated the bottom of the message before the screen turned off again. Izuku would have liked to know who this teacher would be. Intrigued, he did what he did best, searching for answers. I think I'm going to work with La Brava, Izuku explained the next time he saw Shigaraki. She works with Gentle Criminal. They create videos showcasing various levels of crime, and I think Gentle has a fondness for tea. She leaves hearts at the end of her messages, and they're everywhere on her costume. I bet it has something to do with her quirk. His friend was listening absent-mindedly, engrossed in a new game. He had asked Izuku for his thoughts on it a few times, and since the game involved riddles, he sought Izuku's help on multiple occasions. Izuku felt a warm sense of camaraderie whenever Shigaraki turned to him for assistance, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Is she well known? Shigaraki asked, still focused on his game. No, she's usually behind the camera. I've only seen glimpses of her magenta hair, heart-shaped earrings, short stature. Gentle is the face of the duo, and their videos are usually taken down quickly, making it hard to find anything. But Sensei told me Jiren worked with many people in the underworld, so they must be in contact. From a few comments I caught, she seems proud of her skills, and I think it's hacking. Shigaraki tilted his screen and showed it to Izuku. Go left, he instructed, returning to his game while Izuku continued his rant. By the way, the other day I heard about Stain committing more crimes. I did some digging into the hero's life and found out he was the father of 3 children, each from different mothers, and refused to contact them or provide support. Even my dad does. Your dad? Shigaraki glanced up, pausing his game. I thought you lived with your mother. Yeah, I do. My father left when I was 5, and I don't really know what he's doing now. But he still sends money for food every month. You don't know where he is? Nope. I think Mom knows, but I don't really care. It's not like I remember him anyway. If he wanted to be there, he would be. Maybe he's gone. Do you want him gone? I really don't care about him. He's not family. Blood doesn't define you, and it sure won't tell me who I should care for. Aside from Sensei, do you still have someone? I don't know. I don't remember them all that well either, just faces and flashes of memories. Nothing worth fighting for. Even if I still had people, I don't think they would want to talk to me. Anyway, I'm in the room. What now? Izuku observed his friend for a few seconds. He wanted to pry and ask more, but Shigaraki trusted him, and they used each other more to forget about the outside world than to share trauma. Show me. There you see this. I finished encoding my notes. I asked Shigaraki to decay most of my unencoded notebook, aside from the ones I thought had interesting information. I can redo them in code this time and keep them safe, he told Sensei proudly. How did you encode them? New language. Made sure there was no trace of translation equivalence. Excellent. Would you be willing to do some analysis for me? On some heroes? Of course. Might as well be useful. Oh, but you always are, Izuku. On that note, I'd like to ask you to come back to the bar after your meeting with this hacker. I think it's time for you to add your touch to my little secret project. We have some things to discuss. Of course. I'll get going now. Later. La Brava was indeed waiting for him in a restaurant, in a reserved booth. For a moment, Izuku wondered what it would look like two small-looking people, passing for 12 years old, going to a restaurant together. It was a wonder they weren't rejected. Hello there, guidance, I presume. Jiren did tell me to expect someone short. Since we're using code names, I'll be La Brava. You work with Gentle Criminal. I've heard of you. Really? Well, I'm glad. We tend to be overshadowed by bigger events or ignored by the public. That's probably because you don't have any ideals behind your work aside from having some views. I'm not complaining, though. I quite like the last one, the incident at the hospital. I didn't like the place much. Well, you seem to know what you're talking about. Maybe we'll come back to it later. I understand. You wanted to learn how to hack. Have you thought about my question? I want to be able to program mainly to code for projects. Being able to navigate some security programs would certainly help me. Weirdly, Izuku felt a lot more confident than he usually did while meeting people. But being guidance here, instead of little Izuku Midoriya, was comforting and felt like a protective layer. Well, that gives us some things to do. I hope you brought your computer. Izuku pointed at his bag and took the device out. How do I know you didn't put anything on it? Tracers, bugs, all of that. You'll have to find out for yourself. See it as a little game. Once you're sure that the computer is completely clean, I think you'll have learned what you need to know and might be able to fly on your own. Shall we get started? As promised, Izuku returned to the bar. The door wasn't locked, but the room was empty. He made his way to the bar, placed his crutches against it, climbed onto a stool, and reached for a glass to drink some water. Sensei didn't speak immediately. He was probably watching, as he always seemed to be doing, but he didn't acknowledge Izuku's presence. Not bothered by the lack of attention, Izuku took out his laptop, his own and the hacky one, and began gathering information. After a while, he heard the low rumble of Sensei's voice. Izuku, I'm glad you came. I hope your lesson went well. It did, La Brava. I was right to think it's her. She's good at what she does. Her only struggle is explaining her own language in Japanese, but I'll figure it out. I'm glad you're finding the subject interesting. Knowing you had an interest in it is surely going to be helpful to us. But I wanted to talk to you about something else. You've been with the League for a while now, and I think it's time you learned some of our secrets. Izuku felt a surge of curiosity. He had pieced together bits of information he had come across online, from Jiren and La Brava, and even from Sensei himself. He had a few theories about what was going to happen today. Kurogiri's gate opened, inviting Izuku to step through to meet Sensei directly. It had been a while since he last saw the man, and the memory of their last encounter lingered in his mind. As Izuku stepped through the gate and stood before Sensei, he was struck by the man's imposing presence. Sensei wore what could be interpreted as a warm smile, though it felt somewhat forced. For a brief moment, Izuku wondered what Sensei had been like before the fateful battle with All Might. Perhaps there was a way to restore him to that version of himself. A pang of sympathy washed over Izuku as he took in Sensei's scarred face. Do you have any idea why I brought you here? Sensei asked. You're going to tell me who you are, aren't you? And what the League's goals are. Something along those lines. But I thought the name League of Villains was quite telling in itself. We want to see the world of heroes crumble. They claim their strength is used to protect civilians from danger, but often, those who threaten civilians are the ones who have been neglected. You've already figured that out, which is why you're here. I want to dismantle this mindless society. But more than that, I want to reclaim something that has been taken from me. Let me tell you a story. It all began during the Quirk Revolution. One brother was born with powers, while the other was not. Back then, having powers was not the norm, and those without them were often treated poorly. The older brother had a quirk that allowed him to find and retrieve others' quirks. He helped those who wished to be rid of their powers, including his younger brother, who was weak and sick. He gave him a quirk that would allow him to store strength, hoping it would help him one day. Later, they discovered that the younger brother did indeed have a quirk of his own, one that could be passed down through generations. Tragically, the older brother was killed, and he sought revenge for his sibling. But the quirk was stolen, and those who possessed it refused to return it to him. This quirk. It's All Might's, isn't it? Yes, it is. All Might currently holds my brother's quirk, and I would like to have it back. You understand why, I hope? Not really, but I'm an only child, so. Izuku found himself at a loss for words. He had been correct in his assumptions about Sensei's identity. Aren't you known as the boogeyman of the underground? You're like an urban legend, but there's little proof of your existence. You're quite perceptive, Izuku. It's rare to meet someone who can piece together so much information. The name I go by now is All for One, which is also the name of my quirk. Some people, mainly Jiren, refer to me as such. Do you have any other questions? You can give and take quirks? Would you want one? I hesitated to ask, as I didn't want you to think I was looking down on you. Izuku hesitated. He would be lying if he said he didn't want a quirk. He had always longed for the strength and recognition that came with having powers. But he didn't want to rely on someone else's gift. He wanted to prove that being quirkless didn't mean being powerless, that he and others like him were capable of so much more. Plus, he was uncertain about how a new quirk would interact with his body. No, I don't want a quirk. If you had offered it to me when we first met, I might have said yes, but not now. I want to show my own worth and inspire others like me to believe they have a chance, not to be a hypocrite. And it wouldn't be safe. Do you know how your quirk interacts with the recipient's body? It's better not to take any risks. You're right. And that's why I wanted to discuss something else. You asked me about your project on the science behind quirks. I've been working on something similar. One of my quirks allows me to copy others. Tamura's greatest wish is to see All Might fall, and I believe he could achieve that with the right weapon. So, I decided to create them for him. He smiled at Izuku before standing up. Kurogiri, if you could. As Sensei stood, Izuku noticed that, unlike their last encounter, he wasn't completely covered in wires. He unplugged one from his arm and placed a mask over his face. I hope you will like the idea, Izuku. Kurogiri opened one of his gates, and they both stepped through. The room they entered was large but felt cramped. It was filled with wires, tubes, and cables, making the floor difficult to navigate. On either side of the room were glass cylinders containing lifeless figures, their eyes closed and expressions serene, suspended in a liquid. Monitors and various computers lined the area, and the far wall was dominated by a massive computer. You can only come here while using a wrap quirk. You'll meet Johnny later, but Kurogiri will be available if you need him. This place is a secret laboratory. A good friend of mine, whom you will meet soon, is working on my project, and I believe you two could accomplish great things together. These individuals, he gestured toward the floating figures as they walked through the room, are the core material of the project. We call them Nomus. We intend to create beings that may not truly be considered individuals, capable of holding multiple quirks. Do not worry, these individuals had already passed away by the time we acquired their bodies. We believe they might perform better if given another chance. This is where I expect you to contribute your own insights. Your theories on quirk biology are incredibly fascinating, and understanding how to utilize them and their scientific workings will be essential. My friend is an excellent physician and can teach you enough about biology to explore your theories, Sensei explained. What does this have to do with Shigaraki's project? Consider this. All Might is strong and resilient, but you mentioned he now has a time limit, and his quirk may be weakening. Now think of one of my Nomu, designed specifically to confront All Might at his peak. Imagine shock absorption, strength, and regeneration quirks all combined in one body, one that would follow every command you give. All Might wouldn't stand a chance. Now envision taking this to an even higher level. You know well that each of the current heroes has their own weaknesses. By creating specialized Nomus strong enough to challenge and defeat the heroes, all thanks to your intellect, how would you feel if your intelligence brought hero society to its knees? So you're saying I can use the materials here to test my quirk theories? Exactly. What do you think? Izuku pondered the idea. It was brilliant. He hadn't considered the possibility of integrating quirks into something else. Once he understood the concept of quirks being taken and given, it didn't seem so impossible. If these individuals were deceased yet still viable subjects for his experiments, he felt he had no choice but to agree. His morals had already been compromised when he learned about Kronos, and a troubling sense of excitement had bubbled within him. He wanted to assist Shigaraki and others like him, particularly those with mutant-type quirks who struggled to fit into societal norms. It was frustrating to see how the world had recognized quirks but failed to adapt their lifestyles accordingly. But regardless, Izuku was determined to make those changes himself. He turned to Sensei, unsure of how the man perceived him, but he nodded and smiled, hopeful to be acknowledged. I'll do it. I can at least try. It's just a form of transgenesis, if you think about it. Even before quirks became common, people managed to do similar things. The only challenge will be ensuring the bodies can handle the quirks. Do you have information on each of the subjects? Yes. Each one has a file detailing their quirk and the circumstances of their death. Come, you'll meet Dr. Tsubasa. It turned out Sensei's friend looked oddly familiar, though Izuku couldn't quite place him, only recalling a vague sense of discomfort. The man was short, with a long mustache and oversized glasses. He turned from his chair, glanced at Sensei with a smile, then looked at Izuku and frowned slightly. Master, he said, is he the boy you spoke so highly of? That would be him. I'd prefer if you both used your aliases. This is Dr. Tsubasa, and this, he placed a protective hand on Izuku's shoulder, is guidance. I believe a collaboration between the two of you could yield remarkable results. A small creature appeared from behind the chair, bouncing around. It was a foot with eyes and a mouth, and it had teeth. What was that? Hello, Johnny. Guidance, this is Johnny, one of our first Nomu. He had a rap quirk. In case you ever need to reach Kurogiri, he smiled at the doctor before turning back to Izuku. I'll speak with Jiren about your support training, but for now, focus on this and your hacking skills. I'll leave you to it. Guidance, Doctor. Suddenly, Johnny began to emit a dark substance and vanished. Don't worry, kid. This is Johnny's quirk. It's rather unpleasant, I must say, but Kurogiri belongs to Tamura. I want to clarify something. I don't know you or your abilities. You will have a chance to prove yourself since Master believes you have potential, but the Nomu are my finest work, my creations. If I catch you mishandling anything, you will never be allowed in this room again. Izuku nodded, eager to stay on the man's good side before he even began working on any of his projects. Now, since I've cleared my busy schedule for you, tell me about your theories. I hope I won't be disappointed. The next time Izuku visited the bar, Shigaraki grabbed him by the arm and snapped at Kurogiri before leading Izuku to the back door and down some steps. It was the first time Izuku had ventured anywhere else in the building. He had heard about a basement, and from outside, he could see a few floors that didn't seem to belong to the league. Sensei had explained that they wanted to maintain appearances, and the bar served as a perfect cover, especially since people lived above without any connection to the members. It's time you learn how to properly play, and there's only so much I can show you without my computer. I need a proper desktop, and you're going to sit down and appreciate the beauty of a real video game. He flung open some doors, revealing a room with a hastily made bed and a desk featuring a well-equipped PC. The walls were adorned with posters from various video games, including several rare ones from before quirks existed. Izuku was guided into the gamer chair, which was far more comfortable than his own at home, and Shigaraki handed him a controller. And you better stop calling me Shigaraki. I'd be furious if someone touched this stuff. Now look at this. It came out in 2016, but it's still stunning. What? Izuku was bewildered. 2016, focus. You can't already be lost. If I can't call you Shigaraki, what am I supposed to do? That's your name. Call me Tamura, he replied with a frown, scratching around his eyes. I thought that was what friends did. Not like I would know. But okay. Call me Izuku then. And for goodness sake, please stop scratching. Your skin, he said, gently taking hold of his wrist and moving it away. But it itches. Yes, because you keep scratching. You can't just ignore it, but you're not helping either. Try to keep the scratching to a minimum. I'm working on a lotion for you. Your what? What lotion? Why would I need lotion? Your skin is drier than a desert. And the more you scratch, the worse it gets. Sensei provided me with the ingredients for it. Did you miss the memo about you being the first person to talk to me normally in 10 years? Do I look like I have other friends? Fair enough. Anyway, focus. This is important. And that's how Izuku ended up best friends with a wannabe supervillain who often had anger outbursts and questionable opinions about movies. Later, Izuku was planning to leave and head home, feeling famished and exhausted after hours spent staring at a screen and being pestered by his friend, who refused to take action but disagreed with Izuku's thoughts. Kurojiri stopped him as he crossed the room, asking with his gentle voice to sit down for a moment. A cup of tea was already cooling in front of his usual seat. Sensei's voice rose from the TV, low and calm. How are you feeling, Izuku? Great. I'm just a bit tired, Izuku replied. I'm feeling good, Izuku said, a smile brightening his face. That's wonderful to hear. I'm glad we could lift your spirits. Your outlook is much brighter than when we first met, and your smile comes so easily now. I truly appreciate this change, came the response. It was true, even if Izuku didn't dwell on it too much. He was thriving, living better than ever with the villains. His life was free of bullies, and he had learned how to navigate his neighborhood to avoid them. He now had a friend, his best friend, who was just as nerdy and awkward as he was. He would always carry the mark of his past, a reminder of how the world viewed him, with a burn that covered half of his shoulder. But now, he could steadily work toward a dream where he could finally do what he had always wanted, help others. It was surprising that his happiness came from villains instead of heroes, but it felt so welcome. Who else would understand him? If not the other outcasts of society, who would comprehend what he had endured to reach this realization? I'm fine, really. Thank you for asking, he replied. I'm glad to hear that. I also wanted to check if your wounds are healing properly. Don't hesitate to ask for help, Izuku, came the gentle reminder. His leg ached at times, but that was all. He didn't like the handprint that marked his skin, a constant reminder of his past, but at least the pain was gone. It's okay, I think. Mom said I'll see a doctor in a week to take the cast off. You can ask my friend for help if you want. He'd be more than happy to assist. But first, I want to tell you something. Do you remember the boy who saved you before Kurojiri arrived that day? I think I passed out then. You mentioned his name was something Kirishima, right? Yes, that's correct. Such a brave young man. Kurojiri told me he rushed to you when the crowd dispersed and checked to see if you were all right. He was very concerned for your well-being. I've done some research, and young Kirishima is a middle school student, just like you. Do you think I could thank him? No one ever came after me when the bullies, well, did what they do best. I'd like to know who he is. Of course, whatever you wish for, Izuku. Kurojiri will take you to the school whenever you ask, and you can look for him there. He is in class 3C. Thanks, Sensei. I'll go once I can take the cast off. I really appreciate it. You actually know what you're doing, kid. This is impressive. La Brava stood behind Izuku, looking at his screen with a slight smile, almost proud. You really have a talent for this. I could almost do this for free. Almost. Don't tell Jiren. Izuku chuckled quietly and activated his program. He picked up his phone along with La Brava, and they checked the results of their plan. Endeavor's Twitter and Instagram accounts had both been shut down for being incredibly rude without any justification. The internet quickly erupted in response. Articles circulated, gossip accounts reporting things from uncertain sources, while fans and critics debated whether the situation was amusing or undeserved. "Why Endeavor?" she asked, turning off her phone and jumping onto her chair. Initially, their lessons had moved from coffee shops and restaurants to internet cafes, where Izuku had to learn to navigate various devices. Now, they were at La Brava's house. It was a bold move on her part, but she saw in Izuku a young boy eager to learn how to embrace a bolder lifestyle and who had connections to the underworld. Izuku didn't mind. She was genuinely nice and often excitedly shared her knowledge about technology. He appreciated her insights and had even added her quirk to his notebook, brainstorming ways to enhance it as a gesture of thanks, though he realized it had limitations since it relied heavily on emotions. The doctor had not yet permitted Izuku to engage with the subjects directly. He lacked sufficient knowledge, and while his theories were intriguing, diving in too quickly could be dangerous. However, the doctor had removed Izuku's cast and advised him to take it easy for a while. He suggested that Izuku start working out if he wanted to stop looking so frail. Apparently, he looked like someone you might step on just to hear a crack, and his hair didn't help with that image. Afterward, the doctor assigned Izuku various projects and questions to gauge his abilities. He also granted him access to folders on each of the Nomus or potential Nomus. Some were unremarkable for now, featuring weak quirks with low potential that could be enhanced with the right methods. The stories behind these individuals were tragic premature deaths due to illness, accidents, or other unfortunate circumstances. It was disheartening to see the lives they could have led. Others were more compelling. Some quirks were already powerful enough to stand alone, seemingly designed for grand projects. The Nomu the doctor was currently developing, known as the Anti-All Might, was a combination of several strong quirks, all enhanced to work in harmony. Izuku speculated that, if executed properly, this Nomu might have a chance to seriously injure All Might, if not defeat him entirely. However, individuals caught him off guard as he reviewed the files. One was an old bully of his, who had a wing quirk and used to hang out with Kaken until he mysteriously vanished. The teacher had simply said he moved away, a euphemism that concealed the truth, as the folder indicated villain attack as the cause of death. Izuku felt a strange sense of satisfaction upon seeing the injuries that had led to his demise, a reminder of his own struggles at the hands of this boy. It was odd to see him there, suspended in liquid, looking peaceful in death, far more than he had in life, frozen in his childhood. Izuku was older now, but the boy's face hadn't changed since their last encounter. The other individual was Kurogyri. Curious about Tamura's comment that the Mist Man had been made for a purpose, Izuku used the lab as an opportunity to seek answers. He had feared this revelation, and now he understood his theory was correct. It explained some of Kurogyri's peculiar behaviors, his tendency to clean obsessively, as if awaiting orders, and his immediate responses to requests. Kurogyri's original name was Oboro Shikaramo, a teenager who had died during a villain attack and possessed a cloud-like quirk. The details of his life were scarce, but Izuku wished to know if Shikaramo's personality influenced Kurogyri's. He pondered how they resurrected the bodies, wondering if it involved the brain, which might explain Kurogyri's behavior. This felt like a modern-day Frankenstein scenario, and Mary Shelley would likely be both proud and horrified by the developments in the world. Kurogyri had indeed been created with intent. His role, as indicated in the folder, was to care for Tamura, assist him in his endeavors, and essentially raise him. Instead of hiring a babysitter, Sensei had created one. Yet, Kurogyri was unlike the other Nomus they aimed to produce. The doctor deemed him a failure. His creation possessed a mind of his own, though he still followed orders. Kurogyri was too human to be seen as anything but a disappointment to his creator. Sensei had found a different purpose for him beyond mere obedience. Izuku was grateful for this, as Kurogyri was caring and kind, especially towards him and Tamura. He had nurtured and guided young Tamura, providing him with the support he desperately needed in a world filled with loneliness and the enigmatic presence of Sensei. While not everything was accessible to him, some Nomu project ideas remained off-limits due to the absence of corpses. Izuku decided to set those aside for now, along with Sensei's medical report. The heavy security surrounding these documents was no surprise. If the information leaked, Sensei would be in grave danger. Yet, Izuku was curious about the man's quirk and had countless questions. He hesitated to ask, knowing how intimidating Sensei could be even though he liked him. He hoped to uncover answers in the files, but found nothing. One day, he would, even if it meant hacking into the system. After all, he was on their side, and they were on his. What's a little information sharing between friends? Izuku was studying a 3D model of a Nomus DNA, trying to understand the quirk gene and its effects when Kurogyari announced that Jiren was waiting for him. As he entered the bar, Jiren was seated with a drink, keeping a watchful eye on Tamura, who was waiting in his booth. Upon seeing Izuku, Jiren stood up with a bright smile and opened his arms. Guidance! Fantastic! Your little friend here was starting to make me feel unwelcome. Because you are, Tamura replied, standing up and moving toward the back door. I don't understand why you chose Guidance as a name. Well, I need something to go by other than my actual name. Can't go around telling everyone my identity. Guidance, let's have this discussion later, would you? Jiren is waiting. Sensei suddenly interjected through the speaker. Izuku fell silent, eyeing his friend with curiosity. Perhaps his name wasn't the real one? He would have to ask later. Instead, he turned back to Jiren as Tamura disappeared behind the door. What did you want? La Brava's payment. She's also telling you to check your computer when you can. She sent you some homework, apparently. And I came to bring you to the 2 inventors who work with me on the black market. Well then, let's start. Jiren led him through the city, navigating dark alleys and making numerous turns. It seemed Jiren wanted to ensure Izuku couldn't find his way back until the inventor's agreement was finalized. Little did Jiren know, Izuku was wearing a tracking bracelet, just like Tamura, to help Kurogyari locate him when needed. He had programmed it himself to bypass most security measures after all. One could never be too careful. Tamura had grumbled about the friendship bracelet initially but agreed after Izuku made a compelling argument, comparing it to a bonus item that could provide an advantage during a surprise attack. They often used D&D references to communicate when Tamura struggled to understand Izuku's thought process, as Izuku wasn't well versed in video games. They entered through a back door of a tall building. Izuku couldn't help but think Jiren underestimated him. He was familiar with this part of the city, especially the dark alleys from running away from bullies, and he couldn't believe they were about to enter one of the most significant support agencies in the country. It made sense why many villains and vigilantes' gear was so impressive. They were crafted in the same place as the heroes. Izuku focused on maintaining his composure. He was Guidance now, ready to learn without panicking or overthinking. If necessary, he could save any anxiety for later, either at home or back at the bar. Here, he would be the smart and quick Guidance who impressed others. As they navigated a maze of corridors, Izuku lost track of their location. Eventually, they stopped in front of a double door secured by technology. Jiren entered a code, smiled at Izuku, and gestured for him to go ahead. They should bring you back themselves. They're not known to be violent. With that, Jiren left, and the doors closed behind him, leaving Izuku in a long corridor. The walls were stark white, and the gray doors lined either side. He approached one door and peered through a window into the next room. Inside, he saw the heads of Gambit Industry Mitsuka and Tenjiro Kasumi, identical twins with matching quirks, graduates of UA, and veterans in the support industry. They looked as youthful as they had a decade ago, with bicolored hair. Mitsuka's white on the left and black on the right, while Tenjiro mirrored her. They wore rumpled suits, their iconic black and white gloves absent from the scene. They stood before a machine and a blueprint until Mitsuka suddenly looked up and locked eyes with Izuku. She said something he couldn't hear, and then Tenjiro smiled brightly, slipped on his gloves, and approached the door. He opened it, welcoming Izuku into a vibrant world of creativity and chaos. Blueprints cluttered tables, prototypes and scraps were strewn about, and the walls were adorned with screens, notes, and drawings. Hello there. Guidance, right? Tenjiro asked enthusiastically. His sister had already returned to her work, her back turned to Izuku and her brother. Yes, that's me. I didn't realize you would be the ones to teach me. I was unaware of your connection to Jiren. Well, Tanjiro said, casually placing an arm around Izuku's shoulders, which looked a bit silly given their size difference. We'd like to keep it a secret. Jiren pays well and finds interesting jobs. You know how tedious it is dealing with the Hero Commission, the paperwork, the media, and the same type of heroes. Boring really. Jiren speeds things up. And look, he found us an apprentice. He ruffled Izuku's hair before letting go. Of course, this must stay between us and Jiren. All right. Sure. I just want to learn. Tanjiro led Izuku to the table where he had been working earlier. The green teen glanced at the blueprint in front of him, unsure of what he was looking at, but eager to learn. What's the idea, kid? What do you want to do? We can dismantle a microwave and see what we can create from it. What's the project? Izuku noticed the twins tapping on their tables in turn. He concentrated and realized they were communicating in Morse code, currently making remarks about his hair. What's going on here? I want to go to UA. Both siblings paused, and Mitsuka glanced at him from her desk. Why would someone aspiring to join UA come to us from Jiren? Tanjiro asked, his tone laced with suspicion. I just want to learn enough to get into the support course. Or maybe a bit more, just to be prepared. UA offers the best education, and it must be fascinating. Not so much if you're not in the hero course. The tapping continued, a careful rhythm that suggested they were assessing him, ensuring he wasn't there for any ulterior motives. Izuku knew he had to tread lightly. Trust was not easily given. I believe UA would give me the best chance for the future. I'm just trying to seize an opportunity. I asked Jiren for recommendations and he pointed me to you. I'd prefer to keep my connection to him under wraps, just like you. They exchanged a knowing look before agreeing to keep an eye on him while continuing with their plans to mentor him. It was a bit rude, honestly. Did no one understand the subtlety of communication where they worked? All right, fine. I'm Tanjiro, this is Mitsuka, and we're the heads of Gambit Industry. Now, tell me, what skills do you have? Izuku hesitated, unsure how to respond. I can program fairly well. That's it. Believe it or not, I actually came here to learn, not to show off. Tanjiro raised an eyebrow before breaking into laughter. I think I'm going to like you. Let's get started. Izuku was feeling a bit nervous. Kurogiri had left him in an alley near the school, saying he was still reachable by phone whenever Izuku wanted to leave, before vanishing. Izuku made his way, relieved to be off crutches. He arrived in front of the school with some time to spare and sat not far from it. He didn't know this Kirishima guy. He had never met him. Kurogiri had described him and his actions from when Izuku had arrived weeks ago. Apparently, Izuku had been lying on the ground, pale and grim in torn clothes. The other kids had gotten away, laughing and mocking him. Kurogiri had just arrived and was approaching Izuku when a dark figure crossed the street and stopped above him. He had checked to see if Izuku was still breathing and had called for help, looking extremely distressed, concern and fear etched on his face. Sensei had sent him a picture of the boy, black hair down his shoulders, sharp teeth and deep red eyes. Izuku hoped to find him when class ended, but if not, he would try to go inside the school and look for class 3C. The bell rang and soon enough, teenagers flooded the street. The noise, laughter and chatter made Izuku cringe a little, but after some time, the crowd began to thin. He felt a pang of desperation, worried he might miss Kirishima. He scanned the crowd, but with everyone eager to leave, he struggled to discern faces. He had never been good with crowds, especially since leaving school. Fortunately, once the crowd had calmed down, Izuku spotted the face he was looking for. Kirishima appeared to recognize him in return. He looked around, did a double take, and hurried toward Izuku. As he approached, his confidence seemed to waver, leaving him slightly deflated and twitching with anxiety. Not feeling entirely comfortable himself, Izuku awkwardly waved at the dark-haired teen. When Kirishima got close enough, Izuku tried to smile weakly. Kirishima, right? Yeah, you're that kid from that one time, right? You got them beat up pretty badly? Yeah, someone told me you were the one who called the hospital for me. What they did was so unmanly. They left you there like that, passed out and you looked bad. I mean, no offense, of course, I don't think I would have fared much better in the same situation. No, it's all right. I think bad describes exactly how I felt afterward. I, wanted to thank you for helping. Kirishima looked down at the ground, shame covering his face. Don't thank me. I could have done more. I was there, I could have stopped them. Probably not. They wouldn't have let you. Better one than two. I'm glad you didn't jump in, or they would have tried to do the same to you. They wouldn't have been able to. My quirk is called hardening. I can turn my skin into rock. I know it's not much, but… What? Hardening? That sounds so cool, Izuku said, his excitement bubbling over. You can take damage far better than most, maybe even turn into a weapon if the rock is sharp. I mean, it can be very cool if you use it right. But it's not flashy at all. It's a lame quirk. Why does a quirk have to be flashy? Heroes' quirks are. Izuku's enthusiasm about quirks suddenly faded. So? The whole point of heroes is to help and save. People not look cool. I mean, yeah, you're right. Do you want to help, Kirishima? Yeah, a lot. But I can't be a hero with my quirk. That's just plain silly. If you want to help people, do it. There are far too many who want to be heroes for reasons other than helping. It's foolish, and if helping is what you want to do, don't let others stop you. But I didn't help you that time. Well, that's on you. You can learn to be better if that's what you want. And anyway, I'm telling you, it was better you didn't. You don't know those people. They weren't going to stop just for your quirk. Well, they're super unmanly. You seem like a nice guy, and I don't know why they would do that. They're JRKs, Izuku shrugged. If you want to help people, you just have to do that. Your quirk seems very useful. Quirks shouldn't have to be flashy for people to be heroes. That's not the goal. If you want to help, that's all you have to do. A bright smile spread across Kirishima's face, showing off his sharp teeth and eyes full of determination. You are super manly. You're right. If I want to help, I just have to do it. Thank you. Kirishima's phone rang, and his expression fell slightly as he searched for it. He quickly turned around and answered, "A week? Mom? Is everything all right?" escaping his lips. He turned back toward Izuku and tried to bow weakly. "Thanks for what you said. I have to go. I'm sorry, yes, Mom, I'm coming back. Don't worry, He then started to leave before Izuku could say another word. The teenager disappeared around the corner. Izuku hadn't had the chance to thank him properly for what he did the day Kaken attacked him. He turned back to his alley and called for Kurogiri. Something was truly wrong with society if kind-hearted and hopeful people like Kirishima thought they couldn't help others because their quirk wasn't flashy. It wasn't even a question of power. Kirishima had a useful, strong one. No, it also had to be flashy. As time passed, Izuku began to see this society less as something to save and more as something to destroy and rebuild from the ground up. A few days later, Izuku was working on La Brava's assignment. He had finished his schoolwork, his grades were even better than before, and he had so much time it felt great. No burns, no bruises, no pain. Life with and without people trying to break you felt like a different reality. Perhaps having a villain best friend and a villain mentor helped define a clear before and after line. His mother was in the living room, watching a movie as she prepared for work later. She still thought everything was just like before, that he wanted to be a hero and that everything was okay. How did she think everything was okay before? He had no idea. But she barely questioned the new decoration. She raised an eyebrow at him when he mentioned selling his All Might merchandise, but he quickly came up with an excuse about growing up and feeling anxious with All Might constantly watching over him. He could use the money, and that seemed good enough for her. What surprised her even more was his refusal to get his monthly haircut. She usually did it herself. The hairdresser tended to pry about quirks, and the news of his quirklessness was often met with disbelief, just like everyone else. It was easier to do it in their bathroom. She was taken aback, but Izuku remembered Tamura's comment about charisma and how great his friend's blue hair looked. He told her he wanted to see what it would look like if he grew it out. He wasn't sure how to manage it yet and started to get annoyed when his hair fell into his eyes or rubbed against his neck. He had adopted clips since his hair was still too short for ties, and life felt much easier, even if Tanjiro and Jiren teased him for it. Tamura had shrugged, saying something like, "It's your character development, do your thing," while La Brava supported him with a smile. Mitsuka, as usual, showed no emotion, but Izuku had learned not to worry about it and instead focused on the constant tapping that filled the room. Conversations about projects, gossip, complaints, and critiques were always happening, discreetly shared among those who understood. Everything was going well, and he felt strangely hopeful about his entrance exam in a few months. He had even started to gain some muscle after realizing how physically demanding support building was. La Brava's project was really cool. She and Gentle had followed his suggestion to create a video breaking into Endeavor's agency. The hacker had asked Izuku to develop a program that would keep the video online for at least 5 days before being taken down completely, and he was enjoying the challenge of ensuring there was enough security around the various bots and programs he was preparing. The video was exciting, with Gentle as the showman, and Izuku prepared some comments to add when they posted about Endeavor and his work, sharing his thoughts on ethics and other petty remarks just because he could. On the side, he was working on something for his practical entrance exam. He planned to test it on one of the future Nomu and someone willing later, once the Gambit twins, whom he secretly called the Oreos, finished their teaching, allowing him to build things himself. He was also drawing inspiration from videos and ideas from his best friend, the internet. He aimed to create quark-suppressing HND-CFFS based on vibrations and LTRS-ND to target the quark gene and temporarily halt its effects. Such devices existed, mainly in Tartarus for apprehending villains, but the secret of their creation was closely guarded. If he presented it at the practical exam, with a few intentional flaws to show he was there to learn, along with an idea he planned to develop at UA because the environment would be much more suitable than at home or any other school he was sure to get in. His mom knocked on the door, and he quickly switched his programming to an English assignment due next week. She entered, a soft smile on her face as she spotted her child hard at work. "Can I talk to you, darling?" "Sure. Is everything okay?" He glanced at the time. "Aren't you going to be late for work?" "Oh, there was an attack nearby. All Might saved the day, by the way. I'll show you later, but my boss called and we have the rest of the week off." Izuku smiled, perhaps a bit forced, at his mother, who seemed happier than ever. It was true that she didn't usually have many free days. But he had work to do, and leaving the house would be much harder if she was around. "That's great. You'll be able to rest. Do you have anything in mind?" "I thought we could watch a movie this afternoon." He needed to see La Brava, but he couldn't just say no. He had a bonus assignment: make sure to send the program safely. He nodded and showed her his screen. "I'll finish this and come down, okay?" "Sure. I'm ordering food. Do you want anything in particular?" "Nope. Just get the vegetarian menu for me." "Are you okay, darling? You've been asking for no meat for a while now." Oh, he didn't really want to get into that. She wouldn't take it well that his childhood friend and best friend's son, a hero wannabe, had burned him so badly that seeing meat made him feel sick. Fish was sometimes a little off when they ate it raw, but still better than any kind of meat. However, Izuku had discovered a new passion for eggs and tofu as protein and was only sad to miss his old katsudon. "I'm trying something new. I heard we don't need as much meat as we eat, and it's bad for the environment and stuff like that. If I want to be a hero, I want to be the best version of myself." He would have to tell her one day that he decided to pursue support instead, but that wouldn't be today. He saw her nod and smile, and she told him to come down when he could before leaving the room. Izuku then texted Tamura and Jiren about not being able to come that afternoon and possibly not until Monday. Tamura would be upset because they were working on a game together, and he would have to wait. Jiren, on the other hand, could inform his various teachers since he still didn't have the actual contact information for the Oreos. Tanjiro promised he would get it once he managed his first invention all by himself, and La Brava would know once Izuku sent her the program. After that, he got back to work. For 4 days in a row, he couldn't leave the house, afraid of being caught by his mother, who spent most of her day on the couch, binge-watching shows and movies now that she had some time off. That didn't stop everyone from messaging him and giving him more work than he would have done if he were there. Even the doctor, through Kurojuri, made him work on a project for the lesser Nomus, like Johnny. Izuku, proud to be capable of doing so, managed to protect his cell phone and safely call Tamura. His friend was bored now that Izuku couldn't come anymore. It wasn't safe to be in contact with anyone from the league except through his computer, but using Discord felt manageable as long as Izuku took precautions to protect his data and Tamura's. He doubted anyone would come to question him. A poor, quirkless boy like him wouldn't know anything about villainy, after all. He had listened and chatted with Tamura about their mutual dislike, if not hatred, for heroes, and it had been quite the experience. Aside from the first day when Izuku admitted that heroes were disappointing, they tended to avoid the subject. Izuku wasn't sure of his friend's reasons. His own hesitation stemmed from second-guessing his decision to join Sensei on this path of self-imposed justice. The guilt had been overwhelming at times, making it difficult for him to sleep. Speaking negatively about the people he once admired felt like a betrayal, as if he would be punished for it. However, he had grown out of that mindset. Understanding that heroes were deeply flawed, with few examples of truly selfless individuals, made it easier for him to feel justified in his choice. Working for Sensei, researching various people and heroes, uncovering stories hidden from the public eye, he began to feel less remorse for joining the so-called bad side. Was it really the bad side when the good one abandoned children like Tamura? Like Izuku? Now, he would be able to do what others were too afraid to attempt. He would become guidance, and the heroes who knowingly collaborated with a flawed society, who turned a blind eye to troubling situations for fear of bad publicity, would come to regret it. He felt a sense of pride in what had happened to Kronos. Even if he had never known the man while he was alive, the internet and media had put him on trial, publicly shaming him. Few dared to speak positively of the ex-hero now. Izuku relished the power he held. His analysis had contributed to that, and it could be so much worse. Heroes would fall like dead flies across the country, and even the world, if Izuku had his way. He wasn't naive enough to think this was only a problem in Japan. He understood the global conflict, the experiments to create weapons, and the targets of those experiments. At least Izuku focused on those who had already fallen. It might not be very ethical, but science was science, and he wasn't there for philosophy. He was there for power, revenge, to help the forgotten, and perhaps even to spite those who had wronged him. How satisfying it would be to show Kaken, and the rest of the world, that he wasn't as weak as they believed. That he was better than him. He couldn't wait to be at UA and undermine Kaken from within the school. Little by little, he would reveal the true nature of the explosive quirk user, exposing what he had done and what he could do. He looked forward to the day Kaken would be expelled, furious and sickened by it. His one true dream of becoming the #1 hero would be tossed aside, just as Izuku's had been, like Kaken had tried to do throughout their childhood. Perhaps Kaken would even consider turning to villainy himself. That would be amusing. He fit the profile of what people expected from villains. And Izuku would dismantle that image as well. He would have enough connections and power, because he refused to remain in someone else's shadow. He would be an ally, he would be guidance, bringing hope to those in need, and he would crush people like Kaken like annoying insects. And he would enjoy every moment of it. It was sad, really. He could have gotten along so well with Kaken, that was all he ever wanted. Such a strong quirk, such a strong mind. They had been friends, they could have remained so. But society had destroyed Kaken. A different kind of destruction than Izuku's. It had exploited the boy's belief in his own power, pushing him to the point where he saw himself as the only strong person, with everyone else as mere stepping stones. Teachers had encouraged him to be the best, while children followed him with bright eyes, proclaiming he was already the best. Everyone had contributed to the Kaken Izuku knew today. The teen was not without faults, of course, but if Izuku was going to take revenge on society, one of his first targets would be his childhood friend. He would become what he hated most, a stepping stone, forgotten by history as Tamura and Izuku would rise. The little voice in Izuku's head that had once pleaded for forgiveness was long gone, silenced by what he witnessed every day and by the state of the country, the shadows in the streets, victims of the same discrimination he faced, and his own growing power. Now, the two friends spoke freely about their plans and desires. Tamura was eager to eliminate All Might, to rid the world of the symbol of peace, to shake it to its core and show people that they were never truly safe. It was time for those who had hidden in the shadows because of their quirks to step into the light. He wanted to recruit more people into his league. Being in a league with just 2.5 members, Izuku wasn't sure if he counted as the half or if it was Kurogiri, felt inadequate. Socializing wasn't Tamura's strong suit. He relied heavily on Izuku to help build connections, especially once he was at UA. And Izuku was already planning for that. He wanted to show the underworld, the slums, and the people living there that they had someone to rely on now. Their own hero, if they wanted one. No one had claimed responsibility for the murder of Kronos, and it was a bit late for that now, but Izuku had prepared enough groundwork to strike when he wanted and reveal his name to those searching for it, guidance. He sometimes chuckled at the name, as it seemed far from fitting for a villain. But perhaps it would make it easier for people to trust him. One of his goals was to meet the hero killer at some point. He was a shadow, but they shared similar interests, and perhaps they could help each other. Stain was less of a figurehead. He truly wanted to be the blade, willing to tarnish his own hands for a better world because someone had to take that step. He remained popular if you knew where to look, and Izuku intended to leverage that. He aimed to demonstrate to the right people that he was prepared to do more than just eliminate the fake heroes. Izuku was nearly certain that Jiren was in contact with Stain, whoever he was. However, he couldn't approach Jiren directly for Stain's contact information, so he would have to find another way. The only obstacle was his admiration for the one, true, hero, All Might. This would make for a challenging, if not perilous, conversation. Yet, the idea was too promising to abandon. Meanwhile, Izuku was focused on understanding Sensei's quirk better. He knew it allowed him to steal and transfer quirks from others, playing a crucial role in the creation of the Nomus. Izuku was uncomfortable with this. He didn't want to depend on anyone for this process except for science and his intellect, along with the resources from the doctor's lab. He was determined to uncover one specific detail that could aid multiple projects. He aimed to identify the exact gene in DNA responsible for quirks and to understand how, with just a simple sample, he could determine how a quirk functioned. This knowledge could enable him to replicate or nullify it using the right technology. This discovery would benefit Tamura's condition, which he was already addressing on a psychological level. Izuku was surprised that Sensei hadn't attempted to curb his son's destructive tendencies. Additionally, it would assist with his quirk-canceling HNDCFFS and the Nomus. The entire endeavor was fascinating, and Izuku felt a sense of freedom in pursuing his project, unimpeded by school and unhelpful teachers. Perhaps he was becoming a bit of a mad scientist, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of joy in this transformation. The entrance exam was slowly approaching. Izuku felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. This exam was crucial for his acceptance, and he was confident he would be accepted. It would mark the beginning of his plans. From within the school, he would have access to valuable information. No one would suspect the quiet, quirkless boy whose only dream was to become a hero but had been held back by his limitations. Here, he could set his plan in motion. Rumors suggested that All Might had been meeting with Nizu, and given All Might's current weakened state, he likely wanted to stay under the radar, possibly even pass on One for All. There was no better place for that than a hero school, Izuku thought. If he could relay the hero's plans and habits to the League, they would gain critical information for their operations. The only concern was the security at UA. Izuku felt a twinge of fear regarding the principal and his unpredictable nature, as some had described. He was eager to delve into the school's security systems but also worried about making mistakes. He could always feign curiosity. After all, he might be able to navigate trouble as a fellow programmer. He just needed to be cautious about revealing his true abilities. He didn't want the school to expect him to assist them in chasing down villains, possibly even his own. That would be a risky gamble. At least his studies were progressing well. La Brava had been impressed when she saw that he had managed to completely clean his computer of every bug and spy program. She was now asking him to take on actual jobs for her, offering guidance if he wanted, and had even reduced her prices since she was done teaching. The doctor still wouldn't allow him to roam around the soon-to-be Nomus on his own, but his theories had contributed to the creation of the anti-All Might, and his tests on quirklessly copying quirks were proving effective. He kept this information from Sensei, as it was still a key part of the man's project, but Izuku stored this knowledge safely in his notebook, encoded. He had also been exploring the lab's storage systems, finding ways to bypass security, which, while still challenging, was becoming more manageable. He had uncovered more details about Kurogiri, including the tests and failures of the projects, as well as information about the man himself, but he hadn't pursued it further as it didn't aid his work. It turned out that Kurogiri's almost complete sentience was an unintended consequence. Sensei had intended for his creation to be mindless, capable only of following simple commands. Kurogiri's ability to speak freely and act independently was an unexpected result of the doctor's work. Izuku had eagerly studied everything about the quirk that created Rapgate. Not every quirk intended for integration had been successfully accepted by the body. The doctor's theory, which Izuku agreed with, was that quirks were akin to limbs and organs. When attempting a transplant, there was always a risk of rejection. The fact that the body was technically dead and under strict supervision had facilitated the integration of new quirks. This led Izuku to theorize that quirkless individuals might be more capable of accepting a new and unfamiliar quirk, as there was nothing in place to replace. However, their bodies were not inherently designed for the quirks they received. All Might's weakness was not solely due to his injury, and the fact that the quirk was passed down likely increased the risk for each holder, as their bodies could attempt to reject it. Izuku planned to conduct further research on the project, hoping to trace the quirk's history and discover how previous holders had met their fates. His first step would be to investigate Nana Shimura, as Sensei had mentioned her as All Might's mentor. He also hoped to obtain some DNA from All Might to study the quirk's effects on him. As for the Oreos twins, they were keeping him busy. Izuku often found himself a bit frazzled and with messy hair after repeatedly pushing it back from his face with oil-covered hands. Despite the challenges, he was enjoying himself, always eager to learn. However, the twins' teasing was starting to wear on him. At least he got to see the true leaders of Gambit industry, which was no small feat. Mitsuka was particularly amusing with her deadpan humor, even if Izuku often found himself the target of her jokes. He remembered Tenjiro, who jokingly called him Pepper, in contrast to his sister, Salt, hurriedly putting on his gloves to ruffle Izuku's hair with energy when the teen had created his first invention. Initially, it was a small box that disrupted phone connections with electro-vibrations. He had since upgraded it to cut off all but selected technologies and their connections to the outside of the magnetic field, having great fun testing it on Tamura. He had set it up in Tamura's room, watching him get frustrated as his game lagged while his computer and phone worked perfectly. Tamura had destroyed the device once Izuku stopped laughing, but it had been worth it, even if he had to make a new one. The only time Mitsuka actually spoke to him was to tell him to stop bringing the device to their labs because, while he appreciated the effort, she wanted to focus on her work. On another front, he began searching for the hero killer, trying to find patterns and clues about his identity. And he did find something. He was sitting on a bench in a park a few hours away from home, scrolling through his phone. He had quickly figured out the man's modus operandi, a certain number of kills per city, targeting heroes he deemed unworthy. Izuku spent time leaving clues, implanting rumors of a fake hero, a terrible person, and hoped Stain would take the bait. His target wasn't a fictitious individual, the flawed hero wasn't in the city and wouldn't be harmed tonight. However, Izuku was putting himself at risk. Fortunately, he planned to call Kurogiri the moment he stood up from the bench. If anything went awry, Kurogiri would open a gate, allowing Izuku to leap into the safety of the bar. His only real worry was who would be listening to the call. Sensei would surely be listening. He had a strong desire to reach the hero killer and was glad Izuku was going after them. The praise he received from Sensei always made his cheeks heat up. After All Might fell from his pedestal, the spot was free, and Sensei had given him a new purpose. He loved feeling useful and accepted, but his newfound confidence sometimes made his ears ring at some of Sensei's words. The man was old and probably thought himself better than everyone else with his countless quirks, likely even better than the awkward kid Izuku was. Izuku was still grateful for the opportunity and didn't mind repaying it. He knew he had to tread carefully around Sensei, not wanting to mysteriously disappear one day, but he was willing to work hard and was forever thankful for his meeting with Tamura. He could still test the waters and had already safely downloaded his mentor's medical records, leaving proof that he had tried, but with fake ones of his failure and others of failed attempts to enter other, risky, folders. He was curious to see if Sensei would comment on it, but just in case, he had prepared his game, training for the character he would play. It wasn't much of a character compared to his old self, who was awkward and stuttering, losing all composure in front of authority figures. Izuku was very thankful for Tamura's little lessons on how to level up his charisma stats. He still happened to mumble from time to time, mainly when he felt safe with his friend. He had started hiding more behind his guidance persona, someone more poised, calm, and confident when he was with the right people. He was growing into it, still polite with the right individuals and less so with others. He was careful not to show this too much when he knew Sensei could be watching, especially in front of the doctor or Kurogiri. He wanted to trust the latter and was trying to find a way to bring out the man's free will more, even if he wasn't sure it was possible. "Give me one good reason not to kill you, kid." Izuku stood in an alleyway, wedged between a pile of cardboard and trash. His back was firmly against the wall, his hood up, and his eyes hidden beneath long black bangs. "You don't know what I'm going to say, at least wait until I'm done," he told Stain. He had waited a few days before the villain finally reached out. They hadn't said much, only agreed on a time and place to meet again, alone this time. The villain towered over Izuku, his shadow cast from the fire escape a few meters away. The moon was almost full, providing enough light for Izuku to see the man's posture stiff and careful, with a hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Stain's face was still covered by his mask, but his eyes shone with a silver light, observing and attentive. "We both know that our society is flawed. I don't know when or how, or even who made you come to this harsh realization, and quite honestly, I don't care. We agree on one thing: it needs to be changed. The question is how? Do you truly think that killing heroes left and right is going to change anything? I'm killing fake heroes. They're almost all fake. I can count on one hand the heroes I consider truly worthy of the title. And not a single one of them is a broadlight hero. You cannot spend your entire life trying to kill every single one of them. It's too slow." Stain stared at him intensely. In a blur of movement, he crouched down, getting right in Izuku's face. "Name them. Name your heroes." 13, Rescue Hero, Eraserhead, Underground Hero, P. "And where is All Might in all of this?" Stain was now right in Izuku's space, looking down fiercely, his hand gripping the weapon. Anger filled Izuku, and he let a humorless chuckle escape him. "All Might? You want to talk about All Might? This has to be a joke." Izuku's eyes met Stain's, hard green against furious red. The villain raised a knife, rage shimmering beneath his mask. "If you touch a single hair on my head, you'll be no better than those heroes you pretend to cleanse the world of. You'll just be another joke, a guy thinking too highly of himself." And what a disappointment, Stain. That made him pause. "You want to hear a story? About your so-called true hero? Open your ears, you're going to love this." Cold, violent anger made it hard to breathe. He stepped off the wall, entering Stain's space just as the man had done before, almost too angry to realize it might be a bad idea. But the villain seemed stunned, and Izuku didn't do much more. It's the story of a child, barely a teenager. One of those people that society discarded as useless. You can imagine what the child looks like, why they are hated. Mutant, weak quirk, strange one, or perhaps not one at all. Your choice. This child's dream was to help. And this child's true idol was All Might, because he is powerful and strong, always smiling, never breaking a sweat, and always saving the day. The child couldn't imagine a better hero. But one day, as he was trying to escape from his life, from the bullies at school and the judgmental looks of the teachers, he got attacked by a villain. Alone and scared, he almost died, but no one would have cared, would they? That's when his idol arrived. Tall and strong, just like the pictures, his voice booming. He saved the kid, but he didn't get a statement from the child about the villain attack or even check to see if he was okay. The one thing he did was tell the child that he couldn't be a hero, that he was too weak to help like he wanted to. And then he left. The child was left behind, scared and hurt from the villain, his dream shattered. Now tell me. Forget I told you the idol was all might. What would you do? What would you call the kind of hero who came to save that child? The silence hung heavily in the chilly air of the night. I wouldn't call him a true hero. He answered himself, staying still quiet. Now what matters is whether or not you believe me and agree with me. Will you really fall for the hero charm just because it is all might? Is it really impossible that the true hero is, in fact, not? We don't know anything about him, after all. He never spoke about his life, always appearing in front of the camera with a big smile for the pictures and leaving right after. Izuku took a few steps back, moving toward the street. Stain remained still, like a statue, barely breathing. Don't come saying that true heroes exist if you can't even tell right from wrong. You have goals, Stain, ideas and ideals. People understand that. They look up to it. Now you need to consider how far you're willing to go for those ideals. Still no answer. Some people, even when their dreams are shattered, still want to help, right the wrongs, and offer guidance to those who never had it. Which side will you choose? After that, Izuku made a quick escape. He pulled down his hood and crossed the street to enter a subway station. He descended and slipped into the bathroom, taking out his phone to text Kurogiri for a quick wrap. He ended up at home, restless from the adrenaline and anger still coursing through his veins. The night would be long and he had plans to make. Izuku didn't hear from Stain for the next few days, but his life wouldn't stop for that. Together with La Brava, they worked on another prank against Endeavor. As the number 2 hero, whatever he did created a lot of buzz. The media discussed it for days, with many exchanging opinions and theories about the whys, the whos, and the hows. Unlike All Might, Endeavor wasn't always well-liked. People criticized his habits and destructive tendencies, his rough hero persona, even if that persona was still up for debate for Izuku. All Might, too, was very secretive about his life outside of his career, especially when one considered his hidden frail form. Izuku had investigated the hero's life, uncovering information that hard work had tried to bury. He found names, codes, and addresses. One of the most interesting and concerning things he learned was about Endeavor's wife. Enji Todoroki, with a fire quirk and father of 4, had married Rei Todoroki, who possessed an ice quirk. Strangely, those two quirks could balance each other. But Izuku felt a sense of paranoia when he discovered a troubling series of events after digging into places where people weren't supposed to look, reading files from hospitals and police reports. First, Rei was admitted to a mental hospital, deemed a danger to herself and others. At the same time, the youngest boy, Shoto Todoroki, aged 5, was hospitalized for severe burns on his face. The burns were caused by boiling water and cooled with ice, exposing him to both extremes of temperature. The records didn't specify who was responsible, but it was easy to guess that the mother had lost control, burned her son, and then tried to prevent further damage, only making it worse. Soon after, Toya Todoroki, the eldest son at 13, died. In less than a year, one son was scarred for life, another was gone, and the mother was locked away. The entire family was likely traumatized, having lost 2 of its members. Yet, despite Izuku's searches, he couldn't find any words from Endeavor, no signs that he took time to mourn, to help his family, or to step away from the public eye. Endeavor, in the face of his family falling apart, continued his job. He burned a building but ensured no civilians were inside, shouting at the cameras when they asked for apologies for the families who lost their homes. Izuku dug deeper, ending up in the servers of Endeavor Agency. He searched for any evidence that the so-called hero had taken even a single day off during the turmoil but found none. So, Izuku decided that Endeavor would be his main target for pranks and disruptive actions, aiming to publicize his own efforts and gentles, and perhaps work a bit on his reputation. He wanted to make a minor appearance as guidance before the school year began at UA, so it wouldn't be too obvious that he had been waiting. But he couldn't wait to see the number 2 hero fall once he was secured at UA, confident that the league could rampage while he remained safe. If the public believed someone like Endeavor, who likely paid a fortune to keep the media out of his life amid so much chaos, could be number 2. They would eventually realize their mistake and face the consequences. Izuku sent his plan to La Brava, knowing that Gentle would hear about it and probably agree. They would strike the next day, hoping to create as much noise as possible and reach the right people. Guidance would make his debut, and hopefully, reappear alongside Stain if the man made the right choice. Izuku, with his hair dyed black again, face hidden behind a green scarf and eyes shadowed by his bangs, waited on a rooftop, ready to strike. La Brava stood beside him, her short stature holding a camera. She was dressed in her full villain attire, pigtails and all. They hadn't seen each other for a while. They didn't need to meet anymore since Izuku was done with his learning, and when they worked together, they usually stayed at home. Her gaze lingered on Izuku as he scanned the street below for Endeavor's patrol. "Go ahead, get it over with before we begin," he said, sensing her nervousness and desire to speak. "I told you not to mess with the wrong crowd, kid. I was already messing with them before I met you. I'm sorry I'm not the weird little kid you thought I was. I'm pretty sure you're still the weird little kid I met at the restaurant. You just grew some confidence." She glanced at the ground but quickly turned away, checking her phone instead. They were waiting for Gentle's signal. "I can't lecture you on anything, I have no room to talk. But I didn't think you'd be planning something like this. What will you do if you get caught?" "This is nothing. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine. I think we should talk with Gentle after this is all done. You guys might be interested in some of my projects now that you've seen what I can do, just for fun." The woman watched him for a moment before shrugging. They'd have to wait for it. Her phone rang, and they saw Gentle's form appearing on the horizon, approaching them. Izuku shifted from his casual demeanor to a more serious one, embodying his role as guidance. He crouched down and spotted Endeavor with his team, making their way through the street, gathering a small crowd around them. One of the sidekicks was animatedly gesturing, likely ranting about heroics. He heard La Brava activate her camera, introducing herself, Guidance, and the little group down the street. Things were about to move quickly. La Brava jumped down once Gentle was close enough, using his quirk to create platforms while activating her own with a flash of red light. Guidance waited patiently, having noted where Gentle's platforms were as the duo approached the hero. The villains began their speech, accusing Endeavor of various misdeeds. Izuku hadn't shared the details of his research, but they had gathered enough information from public sources. When Endeavor stepped right where Guidance wanted him, he pressed a button on his bracelet, successfully sending a signal to Kurogiri. A cascade of water fell on the fire hero, drenching him and his sidekicks. Guidance leaped into action, unfurling a banner from under his shirt that read, "Fake hero, can't protect anything." It wasn't much, but as he jumped around, a flurry of messages began to flood the internet, highlighting various actions the hero had taken and tried to cover up. They avoided mentioning his family, knowing the impact it would have on more than just Endeavor and his lawyers. However, it would still leave a mark. The final touch was Guidance leaving a bright green arrow on the hero, right where his fiery hair had been extinguished by the water. It was like a sticky note, but extra resilient against both water and fire. He moved away from the crowd, joining La Brava, who was still filming, and sent another signal to Kurogiri. More water poured down on the heroes, soaking them completely. Guidance finally turned to the heart-themed villain and addressed the camera. "People should be more careful about who they trust. It's time guidance is offered to those who need it." With one last signal, Guidance vanished from the frame, leaving only a cloud of purple smoke that only his two partners in crime witnessed. They hadn't caused as much real damage as Izuku had hoped. Endeavor's team had tried to erase everything from the internet, but documents and videos kept resurfacing. They claimed it was all lies, mere fabrications aimed at damaging the hero's reputation. There was little to no actual legal action against him, with no police investigations or government inquiries following the revelations. That was how far society had fallen. However, the public had a different reaction. Initially, the video was treated as a humorous prank, cleverly targeting a well-known hero. Gentle Criminal was recognized for his ability to generate views, often disregarding the law for the sake of entertaining his followers. But soon, people began to notice Izuku, or guidance, and his message. With the release of the documents, more individuals began to speak out, victims of burns and property damage who had remained silent until now, parents of children who had been mistreated by their favorite hero, all expressing their concerns about the true nature of the man. They started digging for more information about guidance, his green arrow symbolizing corruption, and his cold demeanor. Discussions about him erupted on forums, with people questioning his existence and actions, much like they had done for Stain, but with less scrutiny since, as far as they knew, guidance hadn't harmed anyone. Tamura felt a surge of pride, thrilled to see the second most important member of his league actively working towards their goals, eager to make a name for themselves. Sensei had been less pleased but masked his disappointment, saying he would have preferred if Izuku had consulted him first, while still expressing pride in his first significant step. The twins sent a group message filled with confusion, followed by a demand for Izuku to visit them as soon as possible, assuring him they wouldn't harm him but were clearly astonished by his actions. La Brava and Gentle listened intently afterward. They met the next day, and Izuku shared his vision of working towards a better society, offering help to those deprived of it due to arbitrary standards. They weren't interested in joining a large organization, which they assumed the League was based on Izuku's vague comments. They also didn't want to attract major trouble since their crimes were relatively minor, aside from La Brava's hacking, which she confidently claimed was untraceable. However, they were both eager to support Izuku's project if he needed publicity. Gentle wanted to bring laughter to a world filled with sadness, and Izuku respected that. The group agreed to support each other, leveraging their shared goals for mutual fame. Izuku hadn't expected much from them, as they considered themselves small-time villains, and Gentle's nickname clearly indicated what to expect from him. That's when the hero killer reached out again. Izuku had dug deeper into his background, happily filling pages with information in his notebook. When the day came for their next meeting, he was prepared and eager to share his findings. This time, Izuku surprised the villain. He crouched on a rooftop, looking down at the alley where they had agreed to meet, reminiscent of how he had waited for Endeavor. The teen approached from behind. Akaguro Kaizome, quirk, blood curdle, blood type, B, age, 30. A blade flew toward him but missed. Stop it, you agreed to this meeting, no need for hostility. How do you know all of this? I'm smarter than I look. No worries, I won't say a word to the police. However, if something were to happen to me, some information might leak to places you wouldn't want. With careful movements, he sheathed the blade back into his jacket. Talk. We want the same thing from society, revenge, but primarily to create a safe haven for those who feel abandoned. Don't we? Stain nodded vaguely, his eyes filled with doubt. I work with some people. I can't trust all of them, but they want you to join us. We call ourselves the League of Villains. You haven't heard of us yet, and that's normal. Our big plan will unfold later this year. Big plan? And what would that be? I'll leave the details out, but taking down All Might is the goal. Izuku noticed Stain's hand clenching around something in his pocket. What? Do you still believe he is the perfect hero? People need to see the world we live in. They try to ignore it, to live in the false safety of their heroes' shadows, turning a blind eye to those who can't be protected by those shadows. They reject the truth and no one tells them they are wrong. They need to understand that no one will save them. No one is perfect, not even All Might. He might not die, but weakened, he will still serve the purpose I have for him. Even the mediocre heroes, who did nothing wrong but simply followed what society deemed normal, are part of the problem. They need to understand that. The people who have been wronged must realize they need to save themselves. Some are willing to offer a helping hand if they truly want to rise again, but they must learn to stand on their own, even when pushed around until they become the ones doing the pushing, showing what they are capable of. That's what I'm trying to do. I will do it with or without your help. But I think we could both benefit from each other. Silence hung in the night. The area was quiet, not the best part of town, and no cars passed by at this hour. The lights from a few blocks away barely illuminated the scene. And what use would that be? You are a figure that the people I'm trying to reach look up to. You avenge them. I want you to show them that I exist and that they can learn to stand up for themselves, that someone will finally fight for them. On the other hand, you can use my information. As I said, I'm smart. If I can find out about you and your identity, do you think the so-called heroes can hide from my sight? I'll provide you with what you need: targets, names, reasons, and places to search for them. You join the league, give us the publicity we need, and we give you more means to achieve your goals. A fair trade, isn't it? Can I have some time to think about it? Time and more time, that's all you need. But all right. If you join the league, though, I'd like you to keep our little deal quiet. I'd like to learn to defend myself at least. It would be better without quirks. Stain raised an eyebrow but nodded. He didn't say anything else and quickly left into the night, finished with the conversation. Izuku believed he saw a thoughtful look in the villain's eyes as he observed him during their exchange. Pepper was shaking him by the shoulders, a grin on his face, but his eyes were filled with a mix of madness and concern. What on earth did you pull on us? Since when do you work with villains? You literally do illegal work for villains and vigilantes for fun. Why am I being yelled at? That has nothing to do with anything, kid. You just jumped right into number 2's face. He's going to be looking for you. He can deal with it. Tamura's attitude was clearly rubbing off on him. His ego is too inflated. He probably didn't even notice me when I was right in front of him and certainly won't go looking for a kid who splashed water on him. And released some very important documents. How did you even find them? A man doesn't kiss and tell. That's not what the expression means, and you know it. And Endeavor is too much of a JRK to think the guy who splashed water on him actually did the work online as well. I bet he can't even read. Kid, he is the second strongest hero in all of Japan, Mitsuka said, addressing Izuku for the second time in the months they had known each other. He isn't as foolish as you believe, or he wouldn't be so high in the rankings. That's where you're wrong. The rankings are popularity votes by the public. They mean nothing in terms of strength. I'll admit, the strongest are more likely to end up in the top 10. But being number 2 doesn't mean you're stronger. It means people notice you and prefer you. All Might is first because he's the nicest, always smiling and defeating evil in seconds. Fact. He is strong. Fact. People love him. Fact. He is probably one of the strongest heroes out there. Fact. But is he the strongest? Can none of the other heroes beat him? Who knows? Endeavor is number 2 because he is the exact opposite. He fights villains with strength and insults instead of smiles. He wants to be the strongest. He is rough and brutal. He is strong, but if I'm being honest, Water is easily beaten, so there's no way he's the second strongest. He just likes to think so because someone gave him the title. Everyone falls for the idea that heroes must be as strong as their rank suggests. But it's really based on nothing but public opinion. Look at Kronos. He rose to number 26 when he died. He wasn't strong at all. Who on earth is Kronos? Pepper mumbled, catching very little of Izuku's speech. Time hero, we did his costume, you know, Salt replied, flicking her brother on the head. She then looked at Izuku with newfound curiosity, something akin to wonder in her usually cold and stern gaze. Alright, I still think you underestimate him. I actually don't. He just won't be able to do much about it. There is no real connection between me and the documents, aside from the timing. All I did was a very mean prank on the number 2 hero. He faked a pout, his tone mocking. Poor Endeavor, forced to take a shower on video. Whatever will we do about the naughty boy who did it? Mitsuka surprisingly snorted, lightly tapping on the table beside her. He's starting to grow on me. Her brother turned around, beaming. Thanks. You're not so bad yourself. Izuku said. There was really no point in keeping it a secret anymore. Since when do you understand Morse code, twerp? Salt asked, a bit stunned. Before I even knew you. Your fault for not checking beforehand. On another subject, I'd like you to try this. As the two siblings exchanged stunned looks, whispering angrily that he had played them, he rummaged through a box where he usually left his inventions while working in their lab. He extended 2 pairs of H&D CFFs made of white and light metal, round and thick, with only a green LED lit up on each. What is it? Pepper asked, Curiosity piqued, immediately forgetting the previous problem to focus on technology. Try it out, Izuku repeated. Why would we do that? It's the project I'm going to present at UA for the entrance exam. I want your approval, Tanjiro-sensei, Mitsuka-sensei. Ugh, don't say that ever again. Mitsuka's face showed disgust, but she snatched the HNDCFFS from Izuku's hands. They both clasped them on their wrists and the light turned yellow. Now touch me. Both looked startled before taking a step back. That's not a good idea, kid, Pepper tried to explain. They were both looking panicked at their desks. Izuku took their gloves out of his pockets. They're here and you won't need them. What? We need those, kid? Our quirk is no joke. I'm aware, the information isn't as classified as I thought it would be. But those, he pointed at the cuffs, are quirk suppressants. You're safe to touch, your quirk won't activate and I won't be one of your life-prolonging victims, no worries. They both paled, looking suddenly more like one half of their hair. The twins' quirk was called Immortal Hands. It was quite telling. They both had the ability to absorb life through their hands if they came into contact with any living being. They hadn't aged since the day they left UA, still looking like fresh 18-year-olds in their 30s. The first accident with their quirk had tragically taken their mother, and since then, they had only used their quirk on plants they grew themselves. Stop worrying, I tried them before, it's safe. Try. He showed them his hand, wanting them to give it a go. He hadn't actually tested it in practice, but his theories had worked perfectly, so it was safe. Alright, got it. Then, he grabbed his backpack and took out 2 flowers. If those wither when you touch them, I lied, and I'm a failure. Now try. He placed the 2 flowers on the table in front of him. The twins had taken refuge on the other side, as if Izuku were the one with the dangerous quirk. Tentatively, they took the flowers. They both remained strong and fresh. For a moment, nothing happened. The twins stared at the delicate plants, at their vibrant colors, and the next time Izuku blinked, they were gently rubbing their fingers over the flowers. How long had it been since they had touched something that didn't wither away the moment they came into contact with it? How? Tanjiro asked, his voice slightly shaking. Quirk suppressant HNDCFFS. Good enough to present at UA, you think? But how? The technology exists, but it is super well guarded. Where did you find it? In my head. I couldn't find the blueprint of the one currently used by our government and Tartarus. I had to make my own. It's, theoretically, not that hard when you know the details of the science behind quirks. Want to try on me now? They both looked sharply at him. This is still not funny. What? We agreed it was safe? Why not? This was the day. The entrance exam. He would go, impress, get in, and everything would be set in motion. His anxiety was gnawing at him. He had felt confident until now. Tamura's lessons on self-confidence, where he repeatedly told Izuku not to care about anyone else's thoughts, had worked wonders on Izuku's mindset. He felt strong when he practiced, and even if he couldn't win a fight, he felt capable enough to outsmart his opponents before it even began. Sensei had him working on building connections, and Jiren was helping. Sensei was a man of renown, with a deep and intricate network covering the underground world. He had refused to go into detail, insisting that Izuku should focus on his own goals. Izuku was certain that these connections came with one, if not many, of Sensei's quirks. Who could say how old the man was? Izuku would find out soon enough. Once the exam was behind him, he would have time to focus on everything else. With a secure place at UA, he would gain valuable intel and resources from his enemies. He would have a hand in the education of the students around him, knowing what to expect and how to use it against them. The League could set any plan into motion. Izuku could prepare his own strategy and see if he could trust Sensei. His backpack full of notes, he walked toward the school. This was his dream, both old and new. His heart swelled and a sour taste filled his mouth. Envy and anger bubbled in his chest as he saw a small group enter the building, chatting about their futures as heroes and their impressive quirks. How badly had he wanted to be one of them? One of the hopeful heroes, ready to save anyone at any cost. Pity for them, he would be on the other side. He would show them the consequences of looking down on the wrong people, of not giving him the same chance as others, even when they seemed pitiful. Hadn't one of the kids from middle school ended up in one of the tanks in the doctor's lab? The world would be better if they started being careful now. Someone bumped into him, their shoulder pushing him toward the floor. "Don't stand there stupidly," said the kid before walking away, not even bothering to glance back. Blonde hair disappeared into the school as Izuku stared, dumbfounded. "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" His vision was soon filled with someone else. A red shirt and dark hair, sharp teeth. "Oh my gosh, you're that kid. Are you okay?" Kirishima pulled Izuku back to his feet. "That guy is a JRK. He didn't hurt you, did he? What are you doing here? You're applying for UA too." "I just breathe. I'm fine, everything is fine. I'm here for the support course." "Really? That's so cool. That means you're smart, right? Imagine if we both get in. Could you make my costume? That would be awesome." The teen was much more energetic than Izuku remembered. "Thanks for what you said about my quirk. I don't think I would have come otherwise." "About you being able to help people?" Kirishima nodded as he started walking toward the entrance. "I might never be in the spotlight or be a cool hero, but I can still help people. I really want to do it. Come on, we don't want to be late." Izuku had just added a new piece to the adversary's side. At least Kirishima seemed genuine. It was sad to think that most people entering this exam wouldn't be as sincere. But Izuku was here to eliminate the problem. Yeah, right? They entered and soon had to part ways to go to their respective course rooms. "Good luck, Midoriya. I hope we both get in." "You too, Kirishima." The written exam was easier than Izuku had anticipated. Not too easy, it was still UA, but it wasn't anything extraordinary. Izuku probably failed some of the more challenging questions about the law, which were likely meant for other courses, but everyone had the same written exam. He enjoyed the analysis-required questions about costumes and heroes but tried to keep calm and not go too far. He didn't want to show the school how much he could do, not as someone who could be a danger, nor someone who could help them too much. Just a kid, here to learn but with potential. When it was time for the practical exam, everyone scattered, following the instructions of various pro-heroes supervising the exams. They were probably the teachers who would instruct the lucky candidates who made it into the school. Rumbling was heard from the next rooms. 3 of them were filled with students here for the hero exam. The rooms were large. They had separated the aspiring heroes from the support candidates to avoid losing any students in the school. The noisy kids eager to try for the hero exam went outside. Izuku wasn't sure what they would do. He had never managed to know when he was still on the right side of the law and didn't bother when he switched sides. It's not like he could be a hero student. They must be supervised too closely for him to do what he wanted. The fact that he didn't have a quirk had nothing to do with it, of course. He could have accepted Sensei's offer if he wanted to join the heroes. It was just an illogical choice. So he followed the hero, a low-class daylight hero, in front of him and didn't look back as they made their way to the labs where the support candidates would work. They were instructed to leave their bags beside the door and find a workbench. Once everyone was settled, they would have an hour and a half to prepare their project. No pre-exam blueprints were allowed. After the timer went off, they would present their projects to a small examination committee. Some voices were raised when the hero announced that blueprints couldn't be used. Izuku didn't add to the commotion but felt a bit fidgety. He needed precise calculations and didn't have the necessary materials to complete them all in the room. He would have to manage. The board wants to know what you can do as you. You're allowed to show blueprints and portfolios to the committee when you present your project, though. Good luck. They waited in silence for the exam to start. A girl a few tables away from Izuku was buzzing with excitement. Her bubblegum locks were neatly tied back. Her eyes scanned the room with excitement, ready to jump on the materials as soon as she could. The person beside her was buzzing with anxiety, their eyes closed as they nervously fidgeted with a necklace, almost as if they were praying. Izuku didn't care. A few months ago, he might have looked just as anxious, if not worse. But he had worked too hard to let it all go to waste. He had things to do, and this was only the beginning. So when the buzz rang through the room and the teacher announced they could start, he grabbed the papers and pencils on his table and got to work. Blueprints? Who cared? He could still make them good enough. His mind was filled with numbers and sketches, but he felt a sense of numbness. The apprehension had faded into determination, a cold embrace of certainty and a hint of resentment. He would show them all. They would come to him for help once he was done. He sat in front of the committee, Present Mike, the voice hero, Power Loader, the only hero in Japan with a support license, Eraserhead, an underground hero, and surprisingly, Recovery Girl. Izuku hadn't known that the last two heroes, or ex-hero in Recovery Girl's case, worked on campus. This was what he meant when he thought UA could provide good intel. Present Mike wore a bright smile, encouraging him. Izuku had always enjoyed his radio show, even now. He didn't always agree with the content or love all the music they played, but it had been a comforting presence during his childhood's darkest hours. So, tell us, little listener, what do we have here? Between the adults and the teenager were the cuffs Izuku had made. They weren't as polished as the ones he had worked on for weeks, but they were supposed to be functional, not pretty. Izuku slid his blueprint, the one he prepared during the exam, toward them. This is what I worked with. We weren't allowed our own blueprints, so I had to remake it. Power Loader took them and scanned the designs with practiced eyes. Izuku then pulled out the one he had prepared at home. And this is the one I made at home. I might have gotten some calculations wrong, but I believe it will still work. Izuku couldn't see much of Power Loader with his large mask covering his head, but he sensed the question coming before it was asked. What language is this? He pointed to the blueprint made at home. Oh, sorry. It doesn't have a name. I work on my personal project with a self-made language. I keep it to myself. Problem with thieves? Something like that. So what is this for? Interrupted Eraserhead, his voice weary. Quirk-suppressing cuffs. Even Power Loader stopped examining the paper. I didn't know you would be on the board to check on the project, sir, he said to Eraserhead. They won't be very useful with you in the room. You made quirk-suppressing cuffs? Power Loader asked, surprised. How did you find those blueprints? Even I can't have them. Do you have parents in the government or something? He and Recovery Girl were now reading the project with more interest. My mom works in a shop. I didn't find them anywhere. I just knew they existed, so I figured it was possible. I worked on the formulas on my own. I doubt the government ones are the same. They sure don't look the same, Eraserhead said. Do they work? I sure hope so. I'd look foolish here otherwise. The underground hero grabbed the cuffs and, in one swift movement, cuffed Present Mike's hands. Shota. Try to activate your quirk. What? It's not working. He turned toward Izuku and then Eraserhead. Holy moly, it's working. You're not using your quirk. This is... He looked at his wrist. I want it off. Give me my voice back. The dark-haired adult sighed and turned toward Izuku. I can finally take my eyes off him and not lose my hearing. This is wonderful. How did you make them? Power Loader asked after a moment. He and the older hero were still examining the only blueprint they could read, exchanging whispers. As a medical professional, Recovery Girl likely knew a few things about biology, and Power Loader could understand most of the diagrams on the paper. It doesn't work on mutant-type quirks. At least this prototype doesn't. It's based on vibrations and LTRS-NDS to incapacitate certain genes in the DNA, specifically the ones with the quirk gene. There might be some drawbacks, but I haven't tested it for the long run yet. With that, Eraserhead sighed again before he grabbed Present Mike's arm and placed it on the table in front of Izuku. Take them off then, we don't want him to die. Izuku hurriedly removed the cuffs, placing them back on the table. Present Mike exclaimed a few words before smiling again. This is so strange. It doesn't feel exactly like your quirk, Shota. Don't ever do that again. Ignoring him, Power Loader picked up the cuffs from the table to examine them. What do you intend to do with this, Midoriya? Recovery Girl asked after checking her list. This isn't a perfect prototype, but I thought it could help UA? Seeing the raised brows of the teachers, he added quickly, I mean, of course, you doesn't need my help, but I suppose the government won't be distributing quirk-suppressing cuffs. It could be useful for heroes in training who need to practice quirkless. Why would they need to train quirkless, young listener? They want to be heroes. Relying solely on one's quirk isn't a good idea. What will they do if they end up against someone like Eraserhead? Training quirkless isn't a bad idea, better safe than sorry, right? It's the second time you've referenced my quirk. How do you know about it? Izuku hesitated. He couldn't say he hacked the police department to learn more about the hero. I used to really like heroes? That sounded silly. I still do, but maybe less like a fanboy? Whatever. I also like to analyze their quirks. You're underground, so I'm not sure of the details of yours, but I assume your quirk has something to do with quirk suppression. The hero in question shrugged. And what would you do at UA? Powerloader asked, setting the blueprint down. It's a good school with a lot of resources and everything. I'd like to finalize the cuffs. It could help children with dangerous quirks while they learn to control them or give people a break from tiring quirks. I'm very interested in the biological aspect of quirks. I'd like to learn how to use it in invention and support items. Studying the DNA could provide insights on how to use the quirk more precisely or navigate some of the challenges it presents. The committee nodded in agreement before one of them collected the blueprint and the cuffs. Powerloader handed back the blueprint, which was written in his own language, casting one last glance at it. Thank you, Midoriya. This will be all. You'll receive the results in the mail next week, Recovery Girl announced. The teen stood up, grabbed his bag, and nodded one last time at the heroes before him. He had only 1 week to finalize the rest of his plan, and everything was about to begin. Tamura Shigaraki was happy. It had been a long time since he had truly felt happiness in his life. He could easily get excited by his games or become angry and frustrated. He had been grateful that Sensei took him in and provided him with what he needed to challenge society. But Izuku Midoriya was new, interesting, and fun. He had someone to talk to, someone to share his interests with. They weren't exactly the same age, but the difference felt insignificant. Tamura had grown up alone. He remembered very little of his childhood before the streets, fuzzy images of his sister and his dog, along with echoes of painful memories. Then he found himself on the streets, covered in ashes and dust, desperately asking for help. He had watched passers-by ignore him, intentionally turning away. He had seen a hero approach only to turn around, and he felt his heart shatter. He had trembled in fear, hunger gnawing at him, feeling cold and scared. He missed Hana and his mom. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten properly. He didn't know where to go or who to turn to. Then Sensei found him. He took him in, gave him a new name, and told him he had every right to be angry and should learn to channel that anger. Sensei introduced him to Kurogyari and the League, providing him with guidance and ideas. Most importantly, he had given him a friend. Sensei encouraged Tamura to meet Izuku at a cafe, and now Tamura had someone he could call a friend. They played and bickered, something Tamura had never experienced before. He had grown up isolated, with only Sensei and the doctor for company. After Sensei's confrontation with All Might, he had learned to be even more alone. He didn't know how to interact with others. But Izuku was in the same boat. He loved discussing quirks just as much as Tamura enjoyed talking about his games. They both shared a disdain for heroes, feeling abandoned and dismissed by society. Izuku had joined the League on his own accord, driven by his beliefs. He was player 2, and Tamura was player together. They would conquer this challenging dungeon and show everyone what it meant to ignore the strongest characters. Now, Izuku would attend UA and gather information for them. They would prepare an attack, dismantling society piece by piece if necessary, until the very fabric of the world was revealed, and they could rewrite the rules in their favor. Alone in his room, staring blankly at the wall, All for One was deep in thought. Everything was already set in motion. Tamura was listening to him better than he had ever imagined. He was ready to do the groundwork before All for One himself would join the game. All for One was playing the long game, adding the knowledge Izuku Midoriya provided to his own well-trained mind, honed over decades of battling heroes and keeping secrets. The quirkless boy was a true gift. He was intelligent but so easily manipulated. For the first time in his life, he had been offered comfort and support, and he had embraced it without hesitation. He would provide them with all the intel necessary about UA, information that even his hero course classmates couldn't offer. And if he got discovered? Izuku Midoriya didn't possess a quirk to steal. He would simply fade away, lost to history, forgotten and unimportant. Whenever he needed to cease existing, he could. He would fulfill his purpose, give Tamura that final push, and All for One would finally be recognized for who he truly was, a god, all-powerful and mighty. No one would stop him. Even the smallest pawn could help him advance toward his dream. Even a quirkless nobody could serve a purpose, if only for a moment. Inko Midoriya sat at her table, a warm cup cradled in her hands, anxiously waiting for her son to return home. He had gone to the entrance exam, the one he had dreamed of for his entire life. The light outside was dimming, the sun setting in a blaze of colors. The walls glowed golden as she worried over her tea. Were entrance exams supposed to take this long? Had something happened to her son? Was he hurt or worse, caught in an accident during an exam where he felt out of place? She feared that he might be injured because he lacked the same strength as those around him. Inko didn't want him to be a hero or even aspire to be one. She knew, deep down, that he couldn't do it. Her son wanted to help, and that warmed her heart, but she also understood that a hero needed strength and a power that was undeniably theirs to combat harm and villains. Izuku didn't have that. He was a kind, small boy, smart and shy, who admired heroes too much for his own good. The fact that he still clung to the hope of fighting against villainy, despite knowing he lacked what it took to be a hero, shattered Inko's heart a little more each day. She had always wanted her son to be safe and sound, at home, where she knew nothing could harm him. When Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless, it had seemed like a blessing in disguise. At least her boy wouldn't run into fights. At least he would stay with her. But he didn't want to. He still held onto that false hope, and Inko feared it would one day lead to his downfall. She dreaded the moment she would receive a call from the police, the school, or the hospital, asking her to come because Izuku had been hurt, caught in a villain's attack, or trying to save someone when even heroes would hesitate. She feared losing him to a dream he couldn't achieve. Yet, she heard the door unlock, shoes being removed, and keys dropping into the bowl. A sweet, tired, "I'm home," echoed from the doorway. She rushed to him, nearly knocking over her chair and spilling her tea in her haste. Both of her hands cupped his cheek, holding on to him as if her life depended on it. "How was it? Are you injured?" She tried to check every part of him at once. His clothes were intact, and aside from some calluses on his hands that she hadn't noticed before, he seemed fine. His heartbeat was steady, and his eyes followed her as she inspected him. "Is everything all right, Mom? Did something happen?" "Oh no, honey, I was just worried about you." Her smile was weary as she led her son into the living room. "How did it go? Tell me everything. Did you meet any heroes there?" Izuku's eyes were a bit distant at her question, shadowed by fatigue. He smiled gently and helped her settle onto the sofa. "If I get in, I'll have a surprise for you. But yes, everything went just fine. I can't share too much, I want to keep it a surprise. I think you'll like it." His tone turned a bit somber. As for the pro-heroes, his smile brightened, warming Inko's heart. "I met Present Mike. You know, the voice hero? There were a few others, but you wouldn't know them." Listening happily to her son, Inko felt some of her worries lift. For now, he was safe. In their bubble, in their home, they would surely make it through. When the results of his exam came and Izuku faced the hard truth, at least Inko would be there to help him gather the shattered pieces of his dream and build something new. Eijiro Kirishima sat cheerfully in his kitchen, the TV running in the background, discussing UA and the entrance exam day that had just taken place. He barely paid attention to the talk of pros emerging from the school and the current heroes in training who had already made a name for themselves. Instead, Eijiro animatedly shared his exam experience with his mother. Her smile was bright, her enthusiasm matching his as she listened to his tale. He was thrilled. He had met so many impressive people and even pro-heroes. Present Mike had overseen their written exam, and Ectoplasm had supervised the practical. He felt a bit anxious about his results. He had worked hard on the written portion, school had never been easy, and some subjects were so dull he had wanted to throw his notebook into a fire. But if it meant a chance to be a hero, it would all be worth it. His practical had gone well. He had scored a good number of points for the various robots he had taken down, though he felt bad for those with non-physical quirks. He had helped the same guy 3 times, a broad-shouldered guy with purple hair who was about to be overwhelmed by a one-pointer because his quirk couldn't affect the machine. It felt unfair. Ijiro thought his quirk might not be flashy, but he still wanted to help. This guy probably felt the same way. He remembered the green kid he had met after that incident, and again today, Midoriya, with green hair, curls, freckles, and determined eyes. He had told Ijiro that heroes shouldn't be flashy, they should simply help. Ijiro wholeheartedly agreed. What else could a hero want to do? He wanted to be one of those heroes who fought for people, not for money or fame. He hoped the green kid would also enter his course. If they could work together on Ijiro's costume, maybe they could become friends? Perhaps Midoriya could help him gain confidence and work together to create a better hero society. He was tired of seeing his mother sigh deeply each time she looked in the mirror and saw the scar left by a hero. She was beautiful and strong, and it wasn't fair that someone meant to help people had caused her pain. It wasn't fair that she thought less of herself, just as it wasn't fair for Ijiro to feel his dreams were worth less because of his quirk. He hoped to find a friend in Midoriya, someone who shared his ideals and reasoning. He had so few of those. Maybe UA would be a fresh start. Shota Aizawa stood wearily on a rooftop. Known, or rather unknown, as the underground hero Eraserhead, he scanned the street below with a careful gaze. Stain had been following a strange pattern lately, changing his usual course and habits to focus on specific heroes who did particular things instead of targeting the typical, too famous to be true heroes. He had also taken to leaving a green arrow at the scenes. Even more bizarre, this green arrow had started appearing in various other locations beyond Stain's actions. The duo of fame-hungry villains, Gentle Criminal and La Brava, began incorporating little green arrows into their videos and actions around Japan, following a certain pattern. They targeted restaurants with discriminatory policies, police stations that ignored reports against certain individuals, those famous heroes and sidekicks who worked for specific agencies, hospitals, and schools. Their influence grew, and the figure they worked with, known only as Guidance, became famous as well. Rumors in the underground suggested he wanted to dismantle society, overthrow the government, and become a god. Whatever his true intentions, it was clear that this Green Arrow villain, aligned with Stain, was starting an uprising. Guidance, whoever he was slowly changing the face of Japan, and Aizawa felt both intrigued and apprehensive about the ideas this man would put into action.